Hello and welcome to episode 151 of Random Encounter, the RPG fan podcast. I am your host, Derek Heemsbergen. I'm Embryonics on Twitter. That's at EMBRYONX. And today we have some super duper special guests. But first of all, we've got our returning panelist and one of my favorite people in the world, Caitlin Ardros.
Hey guys, Leon Kazero everywhere. I'm not going to say on the boards. Oh wait, I just said it. So
You said it.
yes,
You broke the ultimate taboo.
to
You
mention
said
the
it.
boards.
No, human transmutation. Just
Oh,
like alchemy.
yeah. Remember, kids, don't transmute your mom. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
I do not get any. I
Have
don't
you
get
seen
any
the
of these
Nike ad?
references.
It's Full Metal Alchemist, and be quiet. We haven't spoken to you yet, Tiffany.
Okay. I'm sorry.
There's the Nike ad that's like, just go for it, even if it means sacrificing everything. And it's like
Just do it.
the dog.
Damn the consequences.
Oh my god. Well, he's already ruined the surprise, everybody, but he's back. Your previous host of Random Encounter, it's Robert Steinman.
Oh boy. Man, this feels weird. I was like, oh yeah, I need to start the podcast. I thought about like doing my whole thing at the beginning. I was like, nope, shut up. It's Derek's show now. Shut up.
No, he already...
Dark Souls, Diablo 3.
Wow, I'm so glad you're here. It's been a great episode. I'm going to hang up the call now.
It's basically like I never left. I think Steven did a very good job of bringing everybody back to
Spoilers.
Speaking of spoilers, it's not just Rob who's back, everybody. We've also got one of the OGs of Random Encounter, Stephen Meyerink.
That's me. I guess I'm technically tailess on the boards, but I'm not really on the boards much anymore. But neither are any of you, so it's okay.
Yeah.
Do the boards still exist?
They exist, but we don't really use them. We, you know, for inter-staff communication, we use Slack, and then of course for social media, most of us, except Rob, have Twitters. Which, by the way, that's what we give out on the show now. So, Rob, you don't have one. Steven, where are you on Twitter? If you want to share that,
I am at SJM Taelus, Taelus, and you can see me continue to chat about the exact same things I chatted about several years ago.
no.
Only now I do it more and slightly older.
Blah,
And
blah,
also-
blah, blah, blah. Divinity played on the hardest mode. Blah, 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 blah,
No,
blah.
it's more like if we're gonna be rude and say blah blah, it's gonna be blah blah blah. Isaac can smash blah blah blah.
Yeah. No, right now it's all about the Isaac hype.
I just thought everybody was really excited for the Binding of Isaac to be in Smash. I was really confused when everybody was getting so worked up over.
I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I wouldn't find it cool if that little character from Binding of Isaac was in Smash. I'd rather have real Isaac, but like, you know, Binding of Isaac is pretty big.
Binding of Isaac. Isaac is in Blade Strangers, the new 2D fighter from Nicholas. That game is weird. I don't really like it.
It looks
really
turbo weird.
Yeah.
I just think it's like it feels kind of bland to me, and I guess some people are saying that it's fairly technical, but I didn't feel that when I was playing it. I don't know. It also has a really small roster. It's got like 9 characters or something.
and then they
Sorry, Rob.
I was gonna say, and then at PAX they actually announced that they're doing another expansion to the Binding of Isaac, and at this point I'm like, okay, like seriously?
Yeah, I thought that trademark announcement or whatever, the trademark that was discovered was going to be for the Binding of Isaac. Isn't there a tabletop game coming out or something like that?
A card game, I want to say, a CCG, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that game has been ludicrously lucrative for Edmund Macmillan. So
it made all the money. I did not like his other game. What was it? The End Is Nigh. I didn't like that.
The Unbinding of Isaac.
Yeah, the Unbinding of Isaac was not nearly as fun. He's been working on that Bumbo game for like the past 4 years. So whenever that comes out. Yeah, it's like a turn-based game. I don't know. I always like.
I thought he was working on Mugenics.
That got shelled for Bumbo, I think, and then
So many words.
I know, and then I bought the Switch version of Binding of Isaac, loved it, and then that sent me down like, I'm gonna play a whole bunch of roguelikes, and I played Enter the Gungeon, and I hated it. I just hated Enter the Gungeon.
I haven't tried that one yet. You know what else you would hate that we warned you against already? I don't know if you ended up getting it, but Chasm.
You guys all warned me against it, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna listen to my friends. They know me very well.
I saw a really good analysis of Chasm the other day. A friend linked me to this video. It's like a 20-minute long, basically just like a dissection of where Chasm kind of went wrong.
I think I watched that same video.
Yeah, was it the one that talked about the Red Tower in Super Metroid?
Yep.
It's really good. It basically just explains how, like, for a Metroidvania style game to be successful in terms of you progressing through unlocking new traversal powers, etc., and then like you utilizing those to go back to old areas or whatever, there have to be environmental cues and like things have to be set up in such a way that you are spurred to remember where things are located, or like
Right.
So like, because what Chasm does, the procedurally generated Metroidvania style game, is when you start a game of Chasm, this is like a 2D side scroller. It generates what's called like a seed, and the seed is your world, how it's going to be laid out. It's not a roguelike, because once your game is started, it's like a set map. But Chasm has like, they have all of these handcrafted rooms that are stitched together randomly / procedurally, and they don't fit together in compelling ways, I feel. So like,
No. I mean, even the handcrafted rooms themselves don't feel very good to explore in. Like, it feels very fiddly.
yeah, they're either just hallways with a bunch of enemies in them, or like really obnoxious jumping puzzles.
Mm-hmm.
I have one question: is Chasm Hollow Knight?
No,
Then I'm
not even close.
Then I'm not interested.
Well, you know, I was thinking about that too, like the having landmarks and stuff. Because, like, obviously, I would talk about Hollow Knight until I can't talk anymore. Hollow Knight's amazing; it's best Metroidvania. But like, I've been replaying Symphony of the Night because after they added the Belmonts to Smash, I suddenly just needed to play more Castlevanias. So I've been like working on getting through some of the old ones, and like Symphony of the Night's the one that's been the longest since I've played. And like, when you think about having landmarks in places that make sense, that game really does exemplify that. Because like you get to the library, right? And I don't know how well you remember Symphony of the Night, but like, you get to the library, and near where the shopkeeper guy is, there's that long staircase downward, and there are two jumps. Right, you can't make it to, but you see them, and they're like just in reach. And I feel like if you saw them and they were like way off of the camera, or like, you know, if they weren't as prominent, you wouldn't remember it. But like, playing that game, moving forward, all I think of is, hey, can I get over that one jump on the staircase now? Because you can get so close without it. And I feel like that's the kind of thing that Chasm lacks, where it's like, if you can't do it, you like physically cannot do it. There's like a magic wall that's a different color that you just can't do anything with. It's not something that feels like you've surmounted an obstacle. It just feels like you got the next ability, and now you can, go through the wall or whatever.
I think Dead Cells kind of suffers from that a little bit too. Like, there's 4 or 5 movement upgrades in Dead Cells that open up new biomes that you can get to. And I really liked that aspect of the game, but then it never really does anything with it. It's like, okay, now I just have this key to unlock this one way to this biome over and over again. And I know I'm going incredibly out of order here, Derek, and I'm really sorry about that. But like,
all good.
I feel like Dead Cells was one of those games that I hit like this super high with for the first 10 hours. And then when I beat it, I kind of started to see all the moving pieces, and I started to get like the difficulty of that game gets really out of whack on higher difficulties. Some of the weapons are just not fun to use. It's actually a game I started to sour on, so I stopped playing it. I was like, I really liked this game, and now I'm not. And I need to just put it down. And it's not a game like Isaac that I can play over and over again. It's a game that, like, I had an experience with it. I got to the credits, and if I had just ended there, I would give it a very good score. And now I kind of don't like it as much anymore.
I mean,
see, I do agree that the traversal, like the exploration in Dead Cells, is not as like good as like a dedicated like level designed Metroidvania. But I feel like Dead Cells is much more focused on its combat in that way. Like, it is more, and forgive me, Derek, it is more Dark Souls than it is like Symphony of the Night.
He did it first. It
really is more about like learning the enemies, learning how to use the items very well. And, so as a result, I don't mind necessarily that I'm really just unlocking new areas, because like really more of that game is unlocking new abilities to fight with. Whereas Chasm, the combat is just so fiddly and not fun, and the platforming is fiddly, that like, it's like, yeah, okay, now I can go to another room that is a random hodgepodge of rooms. Whereas in Dead Cells, I feel like the randomization of the map works more in its favor, as opposed to making me feel like I'm just not. In Chasm, it's like, oh, I got to another room, but it doesn't feel like I'm making progress. It just feels like I'm running through a room.
Right, and especially because in Chasm, a lot of the times when you get a new traversal ability, that like you might remember, oh, there was like some gap that I could crawl under way back where. First of all, because there aren't any memorable landmarks, it's hard to kind of recall exactly where that might have been, because they're not marked on the map in any way. Like, you might see that there is an opening, like, to progress to like a door, basically marked on the map, but you don't remember what kind of obstruction was there. Like, could I not progress through that room because I needed to have a double jump? Was it because I needed to crawl? What was it? But like when you find a traversal ability and you get through, you might just find a chest with like a crappy healing item in it or something. Like it's not even meaningful most of the time. So it's really hard to justify combing over everything. And yet you kind of have to, because the only real progression in Chasm, I mean, I guess there are levels and equipment, but your town has like some people that you can save from the dungeon and then they'll add shops and stuff, but it's all very by the numbers, and you have to go back and go through all of the previous areas that you were in with a fine-toothed comb to find the villagers who can like give you upgrades. But anyway, if you are listening to this episode and you haven't heard of Chasm and you're interested in Metroidvanias, or like you want to know more detail about why we're discussing it or why we're saying it doesn't work, I should have looked up the name of this video, but I can probably find it and maybe I'll put it in the show notes or something. But so it's like basically just YouTube why Chasm doesn't work or something, and there's a really good analysis of why the pieces don't really fit together. I was going to say, this is also pretty tangential, but you were saying, Rob, that you were playing Dead Cells and you reached a point where you were like, you know what, I enjoyed this game and now I've kind of stretched it beyond its limits and I don't like it anymore because of the direction it went in. Yeah. That is my exact experience with, not an RPG, but The Messenger.
Yeah, you were talking to us about that in the pre-show.
Yeah, it's the
message us about The Messenger.
It's like the Ninja Gaiden clone that's been in the works for quite a while, and the main gimmick is you sort of shift between an 8-bit NES style game and a 16-bit SNES, or it's more like Genesis to me, really, game, because it sounds like the Genesis sound chip. But it's like a linear action platformer game that's like Ninja Gaiden, and I liked it a lot. And then about halfway through the game, it turns into a Metroidvania, and I actually kind of hate that, which surprises me because I like Metroidvanias, but I think it doesn't work well.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I can't confirm because I didn't know this game existed until you told me about it 5 minutes ago. But like, I feel like level design is really important, right? And like designing a level-based game is very different than designing a Metroidvania. Like we just said, like the touchstones that you have for progression and the things that feel good are necessarily, wow, I can't think of that word. Necessarily different in those styles of games, right? Like compare like a Symphony of the Night to like a classic Castlevania style game. Like the way you move through those games, even though there are like similar visual elements, feels very different.
Yeah, and I know we can't really talk about it too much because it's not an RPG, but like I think that's why all of us who have played Hollow Knight are like completely in love with that game, because
oh my god, yeah.
When you get the 4 or 5 main movement upgrades and the game just says, go have fun, dude. Like find where you need to go. You can place your own markers. You can come back. And I'm playing it through again because I needed something to play before we get to the first game we're going to talk about.
Needed that sweet hit of
I needed
bug exploration.
I played it for like 5 hours and I was tearing through it so much faster. I was the guy that did not get the double jump in that game until super late. Because you can get around a lot of obstacles. Like they give you the ability to get around certain obstacles, like the pogo jump. And I remember Steven messaged me.
We talked about this, yeah.
Yeah, you were so angry. You were like, I can't use this pogo jump to get past this area. I'm like, dude, you're not supposed to.
I remember the exact area too.
Upgrade.
Well, it's funny because I got the double jump like last. So like I did the same thing. Yeah. And like I got through a lot of like platforming puzzles being like, that was really hard.
Because you were kind of breaking the game a little bit.
Well, there's that Crystal Caves area too. Yep. That like it's a secret area in the Crystal Caves. For those of you who've played it, it's when you break one of the walls on the left, and then you're supposed to have like the wall dash that lets you like rocket across a room horizontally. But there are crystals that you can hop on, and I was like hopping on these crystals that shoot laser beams over an endless death pit, and it's like 8 rooms long. And so I'm like trying to pogo my way through these rooms, and I got like 6 rooms in, and then it's like impossible to progress, and it's almost impossible not to die going back. So I was just like, Rob, what is happening? What am I doing wrong? This game is way too hard.
And it's like, yes it is, Steven. You're doing it wrong.
Yeah, but I bet that's the kind of thing that like I bet a speedrunner does that, to get to that area earlier on.
And like it felt rewarding.
Yeah, well, Hollow Knight basically lets you sequence break without it feeling like sequence breaking.
Yes.
Because you get to choose the direction that you go in. Because like you said, you both got the double jump pretty late. I remember getting it maybe around like halfway through my game, and it's just amazing how well all of Hollow Knight's areas are interconnected and they fit together so organically that even though you're not really given direction, you never feel totally like, okay, this is clearly way not where I'm supposed to be. You can usually like still dig through and maybe find like, oh, I found a power up anyway, even though this area feels very high level or whatever for me, you know?
Yeah, it felt like there were no hard limits on where you could go. It was just, did I die here, or like, was I able to sneak past all these enemies that killed me in 2 hits?
And then they very early in the game they established like the 3 main areas you need to go to on your map, so you kind of know sort of where you need to go, and you start thinking about it organically. I can understand why, like, I listen to the Giant Bombcast a lot, and like all of them, with the exception of I think Abby, kind of like bounced off of it, and I can understand why, because I think the beginning
bad
of
taste is tough to have.
Well, I didn't want to say that, but I think the beginning of Hollow Knight is a little rough. Like, you don't have a lot of movement upgrades. It's maybe a little boring. You have to get 2 or 3 movement upgrades before it really starts to open up. But also, that game puts a lot of pressure on you when it comes to maps. And when you first get to an area, it doesn't map it out for you. You have to get to a save room, but you got to find the map first of that area before you can get to the save. I get why that's annoying. And at first, I was like, man, this is really going to bug me. And instead, bug, but like at the same time, it made it so that it felt dangerous to explore, and I can't say that about a lot of Metroidvanias. Like, and I was being pedantic earlier before we started recording, and I think Hollow Knight's more of a strict Metroid game because it's not based around equipment upgrades or stats. It takes kind of that RPG of the Symphony of the Night out. It's more of a straight Metroid game, but it really asks a lot of you as a player, and you can run into bosses that you have no business fighting yet. You don't have enough weapon upgrades to fight, and you're like, man, this is really hard. Like, I got demolished on a boss like 8 times in a row that I took out on my first try just because the progression, I got to him sooner and didn't have enough damage output. It's a fascinating game. It's also absurd that game was only 15,000 on Kickstarter. That was they made that game. Their Kickstarter was 15,000.
Oh my god. Well, I hope they would wow, I cannot talk. I would hope that they have already made their money back like tenfold, because people love that game, and
it's been the number 1 selling game on Switch for like a month and a half or something. Like, whenever I pull up the Switch store, it's number 1.
I feel like such a freaking Dorcas because I owned it on PC since the day it came out and didn't even boot it until it came out on Switch. And then I was like, oh, it's on Switch now, I better play it. And then like I was like, oh, this game's amazing, and I've owned it the whole time. I'm very smart.
I'm ready to double dip on it. Like, I own it on PC, and I actually went through back when it released on Switch. I picked up the PC version again, and I hadn't done any of the DLC stuff, so I did all of the Grim Troop, and then I checked out some of the stuff that was added in, like the Lifeblood update, and then I started with the newest DLC, the Godseeker, that was just released.
Oh yeah, I haven't done that.
Basically, just like a super boss rush. And every boss has like 3 tiers of difficulty, and it's crazy.
Normal, absurd, and dear Christ, why?
That's exactly right.
Like,
From now on, I want all difficulty modes. I don't need pictures or anything. Like, new Spider-Man has like amazing, spectacular, whatever, friendly. I need all difficulty modes to just have 3 different facial expressions of Rob. Like Rob looks bored. Rob is smiling. Rob is just rage angry, and that can be the difficulty modes.
And then the fourth one. Yeah, the Rob scale, and then the 4th one will just be a controller snapped in half.
Yeah.
Like fire behind it and like blood dripping on it.
Yeah. I wasn't a huge fan of that last piece of DLC, but I like the fact that you can fight all the bosses again. That is one of the things that is missing from the Souls games. It's like, I don't want to replay this whole game. I want to replay some of the boss fights. And so, like, I just feel like Hollow Knight was made by people that love video games, and like everything I could think of, they put into that game. Like, oh man, this optional boss, now I'm gonna have to come all the way back and fight him again. Oh wait, you started me right outside the optional boss room because you knew how hard this guy was.
Yeah.
Wow.
Good stuff.
Okay, good. Okay, we've got you.
Yeah, right. Hollow Knight is amazing. Go play it if you haven't already.
Go play it. Game of the year 2017 and 2018.
I mean, I don't think you're really wrong. I played it in like the last 3 days of 2017, and if I had played it any sooner, it would be in my top 3 of the year probably.
And that's why it counts for 2018, because nobody played it in 2017.
Which is so sad. I was also going to say, I looked up the title of that video on Chasm. It is called A Chasm of Mediocrity, Procedurally Generated Metroidvanias.
Ooh, I am watching that tonight.
And it is by Ingenious Clown Gaming. Wow, that's a name. Okay. So let's move on to RPGs, because that's why you're here, right?
I think I'm here, yeah.
I don't know if you're here. Can you really be sure? Are any of us really here, Rob?
I had a student the other day say we're all in a simulation, and I nearly smacked the taste out of his mouth. I was like, I actually hate you. They know how to set me off. They do that, and then another kid was like, "Mr. Steinman, I was asked to ask you if the Earth was flat."
Oh,
and
wow.
It was just, all right, we're going to have a fight right now.
Oh my God.
Mr. Steinman, I was told to tell you that the mouthfeel of Path of Exile is better than the mouthfeel of Diablo 3. Can you comment on that?
Wow. Did you say mouthfeel or mouthfeel?
No, it was. I was trying to think of something that sounded
like
weird.
A fine wine, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I had a Lyft driver the other day who was trying to tell me about chemtrails and flat earth stuff while she was driving. And she pulled out her iPad and pulled up YouTube videos on chemtrails while she was driving me.
What the hell?
It was.
I got some pamphlets for you right now that we need to go into.
So
but and an iPad, like that's.
Yes.
That thing.
Like,
how do you do that?
I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway, chemtrails aside,
it's
that
hard
sounds
enough
like
to do with a phone.
What are they spraying? So it's the game everybody's been waiting for. It's the game you've been waiting to hear about. We've played it.
Kiwami 2.
We'll get to that. Most of us have played it, I think, and most of us are having a ball with it. It is Dragon Quest XI: Echoes of an Elusive Age.
I'm the odd man out because I have too much to do this month.
Hey, that's understandable.
Play a Dragon Quest when you can.
Actually, we're theming things now, Caitlin. You're the odd slime out.
Oh,
Dragon Quest.
That explains why I'm so wet.
For Dragon Quest, me
Good night, everybody.
Yeah.
That came out wrong.
Y'all gotta ease up on the puff.
I will acquiesce to this request.
Beautiful. Well, it's like we've been waiting for Dragon Quest XI for what seems like an eternity. It came out in Japan last year.
An elusive age ago. Well, this is why you're here. I'm so glad. So sorry.
Don't be.
RPG fans pun encounter.
I mean, it's appropriate for Dragon Quest, right? We're playing it. We like it. Rob, does it put a smile on your face or no?
I've been waiting to play this game for so long, and this is the worst time of year for this game to come out. It was the start of school. It was actually the first day of classes here at my school.
You're still in school?
Shut up. I'm an instructor. Thank you very much.
Stay cool.
The first day of classes at school was the day Dragon Quest came out. It came out last Tuesday. That was our first day of classes. And when I finally got a chance to get home and fire it up and the intro music started playing and the opening cinematic, I am not kidding, I teared up. I was I am so ready for this. I was back in my college dorm when I played Dragon Quest VIII for the first time. And all the videos, Tim Rogers did a very Tim Rogers review on Kotaku of Dragon Quest XI.
It's a very good review.
I love his zany writing. His Final Fantasy 13 review is still something I go back to and read whenever I just need a good laugh.
Yeah, and he's really talented.
It really makes sense why so many people talk about the nostalgia that they feel for Dragon Quest, the music cues, the sound effects. After you've played a fair number of these games, it really does make sense. And I'm just sitting there with the biggest idiot smile on my face every time I play this game. Yes, it's a simple JRPG. Yes, you're going around and you're doing the same things that you've done in all Dragon Quests with some new stuff on top. And I just love it for that. It knows exactly what the fans want. And yes, you could definitely make an argument that, the game that hasn't really gone anywhere as a series. You remember when they tried to make Dragon Quest IX an action RPG and people threatened suicide, and that's why we can't have nice things. But I'm just so happy playing this game right now. It's exactly what I want. Just running around the field, getting into fights, and just getting into general it's just so good. I'm just so happy. And bravo, Derek, on your review over at your outlet. What is that? CVG?
CGM. Yeah.
Damn it!
Comics and Gaming Magazine.
I tried to do
premier source for video games and comic information.
You're an ass. But no, your review was brilliant. Rob's review on RPG Fan was brilliant, and we have too many Robs on RPG Fan, so I should be more. I should be better in saying Rob Rogan. It's just an awesome game, and I'm just really, really enjoying it. I'm playing it on PC. It runs like a dream on my PC. I can play it upstairs on the Steam Link. I can play it downstairs in my office. But I know Steven played the 3DS version, so I'm kind of I was bummed when we weren't going to get the 3DS version. So to maybe shift over to Steven a little bit, did you beat the 3DS Japanese version?
I did.
Good for you. You beat a Dragon Quest.
Very recently. Very, very recently. I don't want to spoil anything for you guys, but there's like more after you beat it that I haven't done yet. So like, I think a purist would say I haven't beaten it, but I beat like the main scenario. I actually am sort of sad we didn't get the 3DS version in some format. I know there are people who pipe dreamishly believe that the Switch version will somehow be the Unreal Engine version that's on PS4 and PC and the 3DS version, but no. They're different enough, and the 3DS one has the ability. Like, I feel like it actually sort of got forgotten because of how, we're just getting the PS4 version here, but like the 3DS version, you can switch between like classics SNES style graphics and the 3DS graphics. And for the first arc of the game, while you're in their hometown, I can't remember what it's called, but
Cobblestone.
It's Cobblestone, yeah. You have both. Like the top screen is the 3D, and the bottom screen is the like the 16-bit graphics. I don't think I have my Steam library shared with Rob, so I played it a little bit. The new one.
Wait, what? When did I share my Steam library with you?
Eons ago. I've gotten it. It has been a lucrative agreement. But I realized I guess you can't jump in that version, and that's interesting because you also can't jump in the 2D version on 3DS, but you can jump in the 3D version. So like all three versions of the game are pretty different in terms of like how the levels are structured. And there are like certain areas where a chest will be like invisible in 2D or invisible in 3D, but really obvious in one of the other versions. So like there is a lot of cool swapping around about that. And there's a whole side quest involving like street passes and these little things called yochi. I don't know what they call them in English, but they're like the little ghosts you can collect on the map. And you run them through a special dungeon, and you get to go through dungeons that are themed after all the classic Dragon Quest games. And I don't think that's in the console version, but I could be wrong, and I hope they are because they're really cool. And like for me, I have no nostalgia for Dragon Quest. It's just that series that I could never get into because I hate Akira Toriyama's art style.
You're so wrong. Okay.
And like,
I'm not the biggest fan.
Like I don't even like Chrono Trigger's artwork. Like I love the sprites. The sprites look amazing, but that's because they look less like his design. But like I respect it. I wouldn't say he's like not talented. It's just I don't personally like the style. But yeah, so like there's a lot that's interesting about Dragon Quest XI to me, and having only, like I was saying before the show, like having only played this one through in Japanese, and it's the only one I've beaten other than like Dragon Quest Builders and stuff. I don't have like a touchstone for the English stuff. So like I'm having to ask everyone, I'm like, all right, what is this spell called in English? Because Rob, you were asking, like about the localization, because the studio Schlock that handles Dragon Quest is phenomenally talented. There's a lot of like punny enemy names and stuff. And a lot of that is in the spirit of the Japanese one. I actually think it's punched up a little in the English to its benefit. But like I don't know the names of like the moves in English, but they're all in like they're like onomatopoeia in Japanese, and they're kind of similar.
Whoosh is the wind spell. Come on,
right?
Like,
so like that kind of stuff I think is very cool, and it's weird only having the Japanese to think about, and being like, wow, I had to ask Derek. I was translating a manga the other day that I work on, and there was like a sequence where the characters are in a Dragon Quest world, and it's all kinds of like very like obvious Dragon Quest references. And at one point, a character gets turned into basically an entertainer, and even though Puff Puff is stupid, I was like, Derek, what is the move where like people do the sexy thing, and I didn't know it was called in English, although it's funny because in Japanese it's just literally the onomatopoeia for Puff Puff. So it was one of those more straight localizations they took.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't remember what I got to the point. Yeah. Anyways, the 3DS version's great. I think I really like the visuals in the PC version, and like Rob said, it runs great and it like looks really good. I actually prefer the 3DS graphics. I like the scale of the world, and I think it adds a lot to the adventure that it is so large in the console version. But I actually think the character models are cuter, and I have grown to like them quite a bit actually on 3DS. And like they all sort of have like, it's like this Mega Man 7 and 8 like cuteness to them. Like you can jump in that version, and when you jump, it's like boop. So like you run around and you're just sort of like cute jumping everywhere, and you're like your team of little adventurers just like boop boop, we're all super deformed and carrying giant swords, and one of us has huge boobs for some reason.
Yeah, so it's got kind of like a more nostalgic vibe in general, which is very Dragon Quest.
Yeah.
I would say the PC/PS4 version just kind of feels like Dragon Quest 8 on steroids.
Yeah, it just feels definitely like a very big version. I was a little bummed that it's zone based, like more like an MMO where it's not the big open world of Dragon Quest 8, which is one of the things that I like remember so much about that game. That was a minor bummer, but at the same time, it also feels like it's more handcrafted in a positive way. So it's like, okay, you gave up a little bit of that coherence of the big open world for activity.
Yeah, it feels similar to me. You're right that it's kind of split by loading screens, more or less, like regions instead of one giganto world. But you still get like a ship that you can use to sail around the world and stuff. So there's still a full world map to explore.
Now, the PC load times are like, I can't even read the hint text fast enough. Is that the deal on PS4 as well? Are the load times that good?
I think they're probably a little bit slower on the PS4, but it's really not bad.
It is amazing to me, like how well this game, like it feels polished. It runs really well. The menus open up like really snappy. Like, and I know that feels like a really stupid thing, but like
it's not.
It just feels very polished. Like everything feels really like where it needs to be.
So I agree. I think it runs great. I think it is definitely polished and certainly a step up from some of Square's other PC conversions. I do feel the fact that the mouse doesn't work on any of the main menus, like there's no mouse cursor at all, feels a little early 2000s PC port to me. Like the fact that when you hit you can't back out of a menu by hitting escape if you're on a keyboard. Because like I didn't plug in a controller. I played with the keyboard for a little bit, but if I was going to play, I would probably play with the controller. But like it felt a little weird to not be able to just mash escape to get out of menus. It's like, oh no, here comes this like Windows shell pop-up that's like, quit out of Dragon Quest.
I had no idea how to quit the game on PC. Like I had that moment of just like, I don't know how to quit the game. And then I just hit escape and it says, would you like to turn off Dragon Quest 11? And I'm like, yes.
Yeah, it's to me, it's a little weird. Like again, I wouldn't say it feels like a slapdash port because there's lots of visual options and stuff. I always find it a little jarring when in 2018 you hit escape and then you get that like weird abrupt pop-up that's not part of the rest of the experience. And again, with the lack of mouse control, I do think maybe that's a little bit of a missed opportunity. But by and large, it's still like a very good conversion. And like if you have a controller, I don't think you'd ever even notice that really.
Yeah, that's fair. And it's nice that they focused so much energy on the Steam port of the game just because PC gaming is so much bigger here in the West than it is in Japan. And it feels like that was kind of their way of, I don't know, maybe not like ensuring the success of it in the West, but it certainly didn't hurt. And it's probably going to help the case in general for continuing to bring Dragon Quest games over to North America.
I think there's a real chance that it sells better on PC than PS4. Just because of Steam sales and things like that. Like when this game comes down to like $35 on like the Christmas Steam sale, it was already the highest selling game on Steam there for a little bit. And I think that that's a really good move.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, overall, so solid sort of marketing or port strategy. And then the game itself, I think, is just like one solid traditional Japanese RPG. Yep. It's got pretty much everything that you could want in terms of like, I think all of the main core cast members are likable for the most part. I think some of them get less development than the rest. But
can we talk about Eric's voice for a second, though?
Why? What about it?
Because he sounds like before Christian Bale knew how to do an American accent in Newsies.
Is Eric Kamui the blue-haired thief?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. His voice acting in English is not bad, but that's actually one minor complaint I have about the game is that the voice acting overall is very hit and miss. Like the good voice actors are knocking it out of the park, and then the other ones I'm kind of like, oh, that's and I've only had Eric in my party for so long, and it's not bad. It just feels like slightly off. It feels like God.
It's like
I think-
Star Ocean 2 with
There's
Fate Line God and then that random girl you get who has the worst voice of all time.
Sarah. No, wait, that's Star Ocean 4.
It feels
It
like
was
a
the
poo.
little girl or whatever.
It feels
Pepita?
like
What's this? Oh, Limmel in Star Ocean 3.
yeah, Linnell.
No, 4. She's 4.
Oh,
sorry.
4, yeah.
it feels
Lady
like
Fury.
it feels like when Apu does the American accent on The Simpsons.
I will
So, like,
say, yeah,
it
I
feels
think
weird.
I think Eric does sound like he's probably a British
Yeah.
or European voice actor trying to do more of like it almost sounds kind of like a Brooklyn wannabe
Yeah.
accent.
Sounds like he's going to be hanging out with Spider-Man, you know?
Having a cup of coffee.
Find
But-
Spider-Man.
But also I feel like Eric's sort of accent is explainable like to a degree by his background, which
Yeah.
you don't know for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also think that Eric has the most kind of like American newscaster type sounding voice out of a cast of mostly British accents.
Yeah.
So it is a little bit odd
Yeah.
to hear him.
But,
All right,
but,
Shulk, how you doing there, Eric?
But then you've
good,
got-
sir.
but then
Yeah.
you've got Hendrick, who sounds like early Tim Curry, and it's amazing. Like, I love his voice. Like, I thought it was Tim Curry for a second. I'm like, well, no, it's not Tim Curry, but like, it sounds like him.
Who is
Silence, Kerr?
who's
That's
Hendrick?
General Greg or Grieg in Japanese.
Okay, wow, Hendrick, huh? Interesting.
Also, why does this game discriminate against Robs?
Because
Oh,
there's
yes.
a character named Rob.
I
in the game.
specifically asked them to dummy your name out.
I'm sitting there putting my name in, and I've always been Robert in every Dragon Quest game. It just says you cannot pick this name, and Jackie looks at me, and I look at Jackie, and I'm like, what?
That's one of the main
What
characters'
about-
names.
What about like can you do Rob or Robbie?
It would not take Robbie. It did not like any of them.
That's because
Oh,
the
denied.
character Rab, his full name is Robert, so they reference it in the text. I mean, they say it a lot, so they're probably just trying to avoid.
Extremely hurtful.
Oh my god, get over it.
I know. I'm very
Yeah.
famous. It was a slight annoyance, but it was like hysterical. I've been waiting all year to play this game, and I sit down and like the first thing I try to do, I'm like, no, Rob, this game's not for you.
See, I yelled at Rob for this because you can't be going into a fantasy world being like, yeah, time for our journey with Tetherman, Flithalish, Shulk, and Rob.
Rob.
You know, come up with something fantasy like Rob with like an I and a Y or something. Like,
Oh,
oh, his name is Royb.
I'm sorry,
So-
I'm sorry I couldn't pick such an original, astounding, heroic name like William.
A-list.
Just name yourself like a middle-aged suburban white mom, like Lakin with 7 Y's, or Ashlyn.
That's a middle-aged suburban white mom named Lincoln.
Yeah, sure. Or
man.
McCarty.
She did a semester.
McCarty.
She did a semester and a half at Berkeley, and she found herself. That's when she came back with that name.
Oh my god. Oh yeah. I forgot what you were referencing for a second, but you were doing
Oh.
like
Here, can I hijack us for 2 seconds about Dragon Quest? Here, the cute sound effect.
I couldn't hear it.
I can hear it.
I can hear the music, but
The music's
Oh,
too loud.
there it is. I hear that. Boop.
Are,
Yeah,
are you gonna ask us which Dragon Quest it's from? Because none of us will be able to
'Cause
answer.
yeah, right. Oh my god.
To
the
be
music.
honest, okay, look, I forgive me if this is not where you were wanting to take the discussion. I don't want to sound overly negative on Dragon Quest, but I
The
think
music sucks.
the one
Yeah,
element
it
that
does.
everyone is negative
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
you know, Sugiyama is a racist. I didn't need to not say bad words. Anyway, he's a racist, and I actually think older Dragon Quest games, even though I personally don't like their music very much, have a style and a vibe that is
Yeah.
very nostalgic, and like
Mhm.
they're not bad. Like I actually think the main theme is good, and like some of the musical cues are very memorable.
They are. Yeah.
But you know, I think 11 is a much worse score. Like the older games had a little more music. They were still, you know, I think even the older games kind of stretched the like we're going to make a 2-disc soundtrack last for 900 hours, like Dragon Quest 7. But even 7, I feel like had a little more like song diversity, like in towns and stuff. I think 7 had 2 town themes, if I'm not wrong.
And,
Uh,
two whole town themes. Oh my god.
now,
Right, that's our standard here.
well, to be fair, I think that I've played very little of this game so far, and I've gotten to 3 main towns, and each one actually does have its own town theme, and I really liked it. But I totally agree with you. There's not enough music. The world map music is already grating on my nerves to a point of just.
Now, I'm actually not sure.
I don't even like that song.
I don't want to call you out here, but I don't want to call you out here, but I don't think you heard 3 separate town themes because the town theme is the same in every town.
Not in Hado.
Hado has its own town theme.
But, does it?
But that is also just it's a town theme from I want to say like Dragon Quest 3. It's like it's that song.
Oh,
I see. Okay,
Did not realize that.
Yeah.
And like I like the MIDI beepy boopy music because I think it goes along with like the sound effects and stuff. But I totally agree. There's not enough. Like you can't have a 40-minute soundtrack covering this 100-hour epic RPG. Like I got annoyed with The Witcher 3's soundtrack when I was in Skellige because I kept hearing that woman's voice. Like I got tired of that.
Is massive. Like that soundtrack is massive.
It is, but like the Skellige theme, for whatever reason, it loops a little too much. And Dragon Quest takes that minor issue in Witcher 3, multiplies it, squares it, and then rams it in your ear. And it's just like, it sucks. And now on PS4, you can't even play custom soundtracks. Yeah. And thankfully on Steam, you can. And I'm already like looking at ambient music that I'm just going to use in the background because I'm kind of done with
Octopath Traveler soundtrack.
That'd be much better.
That would another problem because that's a good idea.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Not only
has its own theme.
Yes, not only is Koichi Sugiyama like notoriously bad in terms of some of his views, but also like he's really horrible about the licensing of his music. And every modern Dragon Quest game has had these ridiculous restrictions on like if you're going to stream it, you can't stream it with the soundtrack for more than 5 minutes, or like you can't do it in certain places. And there's like all of these weird licensing issues, restrictions in place, so that you can't even like share the music. And if you notice,
you would want to,
if you would want to, and the fact that you can't even use your own custom soundtrack over it on PS4 has like stopped forcing me to listen to your crappy music, you old racist.
It's a little bit of a bummer because like the production of this game is so high quality. Like they made 3 versions of this game. And the ports are pretty good. Like Square Enix did not slack off on this game. And I think, I understand why they would keep going with Sugiyama. He's done every game. There is a vibe in Dragon Quest that people want. And as we saw with 9, when you change that vibe, everyone loses their mind.
Introduce a little chaos.
Yeah, if they change the music, they would introduce a little chaos. Like, I'm pretty sure all the fans would be off, like, driving cars around trying to, run Batman over or whatever it is they do. But, like, I also think, I really feel strongly, like, Square Enix has been pretty good with some of their newer franchises, Octopath, for example, of, like, bringing in these new composers. They're not necessarily responsible for that. But, bringing in new talent, I think, is the best way to keep things feeling fresh. And you can still keep the tone. Like, Final Fantasy XIV is undeniably Final Fantasy. But like Uematsu has had very little to do with that soundtrack, but it still, I would say, fits in with the canon of that series.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of the problem is that Final Fantasy has had several composers. We haven't had just Uematsu since I think 9. So, and I don't even think he did all the cutscene. No, he did. Never mind. Anyway, point being, Dragon Quest as a series has not yet been like trained to see like people will come in and replace Sugiyama. Yeah. And I personally think in the next one, you won't get all Sugiyama. You'll probably get either somebody else entirely or a pair of people or a group of people. And I think that would really help the audio identity of the game.
Because they don't have any identity. Having played, not to cut you off, but having played 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 again, and now 11 in the past 2 years, with the exception of 8, because that was at a point in my life that I can really vividly remember, I could not tell you where all the music was coming from.
Right. And
very samey.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like, again, it's not like you have to get away from the tone. Like, there is a tone to Dragon Quest. Like, I think I know when I'm listening to Dragon Quest music, kind of like I know when I'm listening to anything from Falcom. Like, there is a vibe, although Falcom is pretty diverse too. But like, like, for example, like with Divinity Original Sin 2, the composer from the first game, who had worked with Larian on all their previous games, I think, he passed away, and he was very distinctive and very good. And the new composer managed to keep things, obviously it's not identical, but the tone of the soundtrack feels very much like the previous composer's works. And if you look at like Bravely Default fits in with that canon of JRPG music that feels like those like classics that we like. So like there's no reason they can't bring in someone new and like maybe younger and hopefully 100% less racist to do the music and still have it feel like Dragon Quest, but have it feel a little more like lively and like a little bit of verve in there. Like, I hope very much that Dragon Quest 12, which we know is coming, I'm sure it is. Just don't expect a simultaneous localization. I feel like it would benefit so hugely. Like, I feel like you could actually increase the Dragon Questiness of it by bringing someone new in with some fresh ideas.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I mean, not to belabor the point, I just think it's time for some evolution or for some variance. And I get that there's this kind of paradigm where Final Fantasy is the Square Enix franchise that is ambitious and bold and tries new things and tries to innovate with every entry. And then Dragon Quest is the other half where it's traditional and comforting. And that's all well and good for there to be that kind of distinction. And that's fine. I just think that musically, that's one area where Dragon Quest has become incredibly stale, and it's no longer like nostalgic or traditional. I just think it's bland.
Yeah. No, I agree. I spent I think Caitlin will appreciate this. I spent the summer listening to a lot of Xenogears.
Yes.
Because, like, I was getting grading done in my summer courses. And Xenogears is very MIDI. I mean, it's very PlayStation 1, bippity boppity boopity, but it has melody. It has substance to it. I can remember scenes vividly from that soundtrack. And I'm just like, man, if you could put some of that into Dragon Quest, like, you could still have that high energy, bippity boppity music. It works. Yeah. No, we're not doing Honeybee Inn. No,
that wasn't Honeybee Inn. That was Dragon Quest.
Oh, okay. I thought it was Honeybee Inn.
It did sound like Honeybee Inn.
Yeah, it did a little bit.
Totally do it. But I want to, I kind of see. I agree with Derek. I want to get back to really good stuff about Dragon Quest. Just running around the field and the fact that the fights are now, you can see them on the field. They had that little bit of interaction that you had from like a Shin Megami Tensei 4 where you can attack enemies to do a little bit of damage to them.
Mm-hmm. The field enemies are real cool. Or the way it works in console was the first thing I noticed. It's really cool. Like it's on the same field area.
Yeah. It's so super snappy, like in and out of combat super fast, which is just, as I'm running lower and lower on free time to play games, like the fact that the game is so snappy and is respectful of that, and just the quality of life improvements that I think we all take for granted in a lot of other series. Now that Dragon Quest has them, like the fact that I know where to go for a quest, where, like, remember in Dragon Quest 7, it's like, where's the one puppy I need to talk to in this village to make this quest continue? Oh my God, I've gone through all these houses. Oh, he was on the second floor of that house? F. Like, it's just like, come on.
You petted all the dogs?
I petted all the dogs, and the story is still not going. So clearly there is one more dog that I need to pet. Or this one stone statue I need to talk to. Like, it's just, I think Dragon Quest XI is so much better about that. And the towns are gorgeous. Like, they're just fun to run around. And then they incentivize you to explore, which is like, that's the number one thing for me in any video game. Like, oh, I found a recipe for an item. Ooh, now I have a much stronger item earlier in the game than I should have. Oh, now I'm crafting it in the cute little forge thing, and it's got this cute little mini game. And ooh,
what do they call the forge in English?
The fun size forge.
The what?
The fun size forge.
That's funny.
It's great.
And that little mini game gives you perfectionist points that then you can use to upgrade your other material. Like, all of these systems are feeding into each other without overwhelming the player. And I think that's what I really like about Dragon Quest XI, is that they are incorporating some new things, but they're not like cranking the dial to 11 and then breaking it off with systems and numbers and things to worry about.
They two things on that same note that I really like. One that is not systemic, but I also think it's the Dragon Quest with the best cutscene.
Yeah, they're super
like they look very cool. And like even in the 3DS, like the action scenes. I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but like there's a scene early on where Hendrik Greg is like chasing you on a horse.
I just
on 3DS it looks awesome. Like I don't know how it looks on console, but I'm sure it looks good because it's sort of similar framing. But like I was like, wow, this is very like. That, I will say, is something I think that they've borrowed from the more modern Final Fantasy vibe of, like, very dramatic cutscene framing. But it still feels like Dragon Quest. It doesn't feel like they're, like, dipping into, like, 358/2 melodrama or something. It's very. It still feels very Dragon Questy. And then I like I think they called it in Japanese they call it shibari play, like binding the player. But you can like set limitations on the game. Like you can be like, oh, you can only use like these kinds of weapons, or like I think what is it, Draconian Quest?
Yeah, Draconian Quest.
Yeah, like very cool stuff. The game is like just stupid easy normally. Like you could probably random attack through or physical attack through every battle and win, at least in 3DS. But like I like that there's that sort of more modern edge of like give the player what they want. And like on that note, like I also noticed in the console version, you can actually set the battles to display like classic battles, like where like it goes like first person, or not, like it sets the camera behind the party. So like there's a lot of like that modern stuff of like craft the experience to be what you want, but it still always has this like Dragon Quest spirit that I really find very like it is appealing to people who love Dragon Quest, but also to people who are like maybe newer or younger or might not have as much nostalgia for like, I got to do a random battle every 3 steps.
They're not random anymore, though.
No, it's good stuff. The enemies on the map is great. They're so easy, and like you can actually avoid them. It's not like Chrono Trigger enemies on the map where it's like, surprise, you hit the one trigger that's on the other side of the map for the enemy who's 3 screens away, and now you're in a battle. It's like the enemy is right there, and you can walk around them.
And they put the zoom. Wait, no, I shouldn't say zoom because that's a spell. They put the dash in the game so you can run around the environment super fast. I can imagine that was probably a little grating on the original Japanese release because the environments are big.
Yeah.
Oh, so
Really
is this like a console thing? Like,
there's just a dash button to move faster. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah. The 3DS one doesn't have that, but the environments on 3DS are not that large.
Yeah, they're very large, and I love that sense of scale. Like when you get to the downtown Heliodor area, that sense of scale was just awesome. And I remember them showing that early.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah,
yeah, it's really cool. I mean,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Is that the town that has like the castle? You're like in the bottom, and there's like castle walls on the sides with like.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It's just they did a really good job with the Unreal Engine and making this game feel like it feels like a big version of a 8 or 16-bit RPG. And that is cool. That's super awesome to me. And you're just always finding things and crafting materials. There's like it feels like they turned up the Dragon Quest Builders stuff a little bit. There's been crafting systems in Dragon Quest games before, but now it's like, now I got that builder's itch a little bit where I'm like,
there's a lot of side quests. I mean, I think the side quests are the same between both versions, but there's a lot of like, oh, my wife wanted a new sword, but I accidentally sold it. Can you make me a new one with the mystery blacksmith?
Yes.
Oh, so yeah. Random point, or I actually just checked. The dash is added in the English version. It's not.
Yeah. It's not.
That's cool. That's a good addition. They made a lot of like it's very like mid 2000s Square, where like we released Final Fantasy X, but we added a bunch of stuff to it to the English release. It's very much like that, and I would be shocked if these don't get back ported somehow to the Japanese version. But like I think that's a really good way to like look at the game and be like, how can we make this more player friendly, like they did with Zodiac Age. Which is like that's the best version of that game for so many reasons. And this is there's nothing wrong with like I shouldn't the first time across this field, sure, I love taking in the adventure, but later on in the game when I'm grinding and just trying to get cool swords, I need to just get me through.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I actually have a question. I haven't got to any field areas in the console one because like I can't, if I play it, Rob can't play it. So obviously, are the fields? And I think this might be a better question for Derek maybe or Caitlin. I actually are you playing it too, Caitlin?
No, I want to very much, but this month has been an onslaught of stuff. So
she's busy with stuff she can't talk about.
Yeah, secret stuff.
Secrets.
She's developing Final Fantasy 16.
It's ridiculous because there's Dragon Quest, and then the thing that comes out next week that I can't talk about, and then Final Fantasy 14 patch, and then Valkyria Chronicles 4, and then it's Spider-Man Odyssey, and then Redemption 2, Spider-Man. Oh god, so it's probably going to be like a Black Friday, Christmas kind of thing for me,
and then 8 more months after that because the game is 1 million hours long.
Yeah, so
okay, yeah. So then in that case, probably just Derek. So I got the sense looking at it, are the areas like Tales of Berseria and Tales of Excelia where it's like, here's a big open circle area with kind of just enemies thrown in it, and like there's not much, I would not argue there's much level design in Berseria. It's literally like we made a tile set and we created a 3D environment that has very little interest other than like some chests. Is there a little more structuring to the field areas in Dragon Quest?
There's a little more. It's not like they're not overly complex in the fields usually. A lot of them will at least have different levels, or as you are aware, you can ride mounts in some areas where like a monster that you can like hop into an egg monster and use it to hop up to a high ledge, or there's an like
exoskeleton.
Yeah, an exoskeleton.
Lego. So wait a second. What happens when you defeat it? Is it like Lego my ego?
Oh my god.
All the king's men couldn't put it back together.
How do I remove one person from a call?
Excellent.
But which one?
In life.
All of
really?
Yeah. Well, I guess that was an interesting question because again, I don't want to be negative, but like one thing I noticed in the 3DS version is that, and I actually, even though I love Octopath, I would ding it for this as well. So many of these modern JRPGs get so many things right, but fail completely on level design. And like Octopath is every dungeon is the same. It's here's hallways with boxes in it.
Yes.
Dragon Quest on 3DS was literally every dungeon is the same. It's just like there's a different animal you can ride, and it's like you ride it for like 10 seconds. Although some of the field maps did that, which is cool. Like there's I don't know, you've done it, Derek, but like there's the enemy that you can like fly above the map a little bit with. I assume that's in the console one too.
Yep. Yeah.
And it felt, it's like, okay, the combat here is fun and like visually it's nice, but like I feel sort of like I'm just running down halls. It just really makes me wish every game would just be Golden Sun.
And have more interesting dungeons. Yeah, I do think that they are a little bland. I don't know. I wouldn't even say that they're that bad. Like they're so middle of the road for me that I just don't really think much of the dungeon and area design in this game.
Right.
It's serviceable. It's fine. It's not
egregious.
Amazing. Yeah. And there are some areas that are more complex than others, like dungeons that have many tiers. There's a particular dungeon that I'm thinking of right now that's got like 9 floors where you go deeper and deeper, and sometimes you have to like go back up to like fall in a hole to get lower. So those are a little bit more.
I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, those are a bit more interesting, but there's not like. It's not as bad as Berseria, but it's also not the most complex dungeon design I've ever seen. I think it's fine. There are just no puzzles really to speak of.
Right. Well, it's very in keeping with the series. Like, I don't historically think Dragon Quest has had like very like puzzle dense dungeons, and I know some players don't like that.
They've had like little tiny gimmicks in them. Like, okay, this one has like the switches you need to hit, but like nothing too major.
Right. Like there's one dungeon, kind of like I would say like a fourth of the way through the game in Dragon Quest where like there are pits that you can fall into and you can go up and down, and you have to sort of run to get all the boxes. Basically, you have to go up and down several staircases. So like it's not like there's no interest, but it's very like Phantasy Star where it's like all you're really doing is going up and down levels, which is not, again, the game itself, I don't think focuses on that, like mechanically, like you have the animal, like the ride-on partner things. But like, it's very much a, like, you go through the dungeon, you fight the battle. Cause I don't think Dragon Quest has ever been a like Shin Megami Tensei, like this game is about delving into these, mad labyrinths and like building your party. It's very like, you went on your brief adventure through this dungeon and saved the day. But I just hope more RPGs become Wild Arms and Golden Sun and have
I was gonna say Shin Megami
tools and puzzles.
I was gonna say Shin Megami Tensei 4 without the obnoxious overworld system. Like I remember those dungeons, like those office buildings and stuff. Like those were very memorable to me.
Yeah, those were good dungeons. They do have pretty solid dungeons in that series. Yeah, I know. Not everyone would agree with Digital Devil Saga having great dungeons, but they have long dungeons that are very complicated.
They are very long. Yeah.
It's not the final dungeon from, what was it, Apocalypse?
No, we're not talking. I'm in my happy place. I'm not talking about it.
I watched a video of that after Rob ranted about it to me for like a couple of years. Yeah, it looked pretty complex.
Well, unless there's some in the epilogue of Dragon Quest XI, there are no teleportation dungeons that I know of in that game. So, so we are safe. Well, we've talked at length about Dragon Quest XI. Is there anything else you'd like to add? I mean, I think it's fantastic. It's not without its faults, but I think that it is like a super, super solid traditional Japanese RPG with likable characters. Sylvando is amazing. Combat is fun and solid.
I'm so excited to meet Sylvando.
Progression is good.
So excited.
Oh, darling. Should
like,
you ever be?
It's just a charming ass game. There's like no other way to say it. Like the whole time I'm just smiling. I think it's Steven said a little bit ago the game's really easy. I think that actually plays to the game's strength. Like it's an easy breezy adventure. It's fun. Like, and I'm not saying you were saying that wasn't a strength.
No, right. Well,
yeah,
it's a very pleasant game. Like I said, like I don't have a lot of nostalgia, but I can sense where the nostalgia in this is coming from. Like, the world is named after what's his name, Loto, or the hero from the old ones, Erdrick. I don't know what they did in English.
It's Erdria.
Erdria, right. And like in Japanese it's like Loto Zaria, which is like very clever. And like, for me, I played it in Japanese because I wanted to play a game with lots of writing and stuff, and it's very well written, which is why I think the team that handled it in English did a great job, and was a good choice for it, because there's lots of accents in the Japanese version. Like I look up, obviously any translator who's good looks up words, but like I'm playing it and like looking up lots of like, they have like unique pronouns that I've never heard. Like, so it's very like a very rich game linguistically. So I actually think for me, it was great that the rest of the game was just so like, again, I maybe it doesn't sound positive to say it's a great 7 out of 10, but to me, it was a fun game that, I didn't like explosively get excited about it, but like it was fun to play. And more importantly, I didn't have to worry about all these weird systems and nonsense. It was just like I could focus on reading the story and getting the personality of these characters. And to what you said, Rob, I think it excels in that. It's very the kind of game you play where you just want to like get immersed in this nice story and these charming characters, and everything is pleasant and nothing really grates on you. It's just like, yes, this is an easy, comforting experience.
Yep. I'm digging it quite a bit. I'm very happy. It is exactly what I wanted. I think in some ways maybe it's not surprising, but that's okay. Like it is okay.
Yeah, I think there are some surprising. I legitimately was surprised by a couple of plot points here and there, but overall, the arc of the story is pretty like it's hero saves world from the darkness. Like that's the game. It's the hero's journey, and it's well done. Like
Rob needs something to calm him into neutrality every now and then.
It's true. It's true. Or you could have something that's like so subversive that eventually it gets to the point where it just doesn't mean anything or say anything.
Like anything by NIS America at this point?
No, I was basically I watched The Last Jedi again the other night, and I was like, wow, you're just subversive for the sake.
We're not allowed to talk about Last Jedi.
I don't think we're gonna do this. No. We're just
because I wasn't super high on that, and I have somehow become a defender of Last Jedi. Okay, so no,
okay. Whatever.
Rob, did I hear your puppy a minute ago?
No.
Okay.
I'm downstairs in the basement. The puppy's upstairs asleep.
Oh, puppy no.
I thought I heard like puppy whining. No.
That's the dog you had to go pet. That's why you couldn't find him.
That was the one that continued my quest.
All dogs deserve pets.
All dogs deserve pets.
Yes, they do. Well, Rob, I would like to get your thoughts on another game. Yes, and kitties, because you've been playing all the big hits lately, the heavy hitters. You've become something of like a Yakuza fanatic, from what I can tell.
Apparently, I really like these here Yakuza games.
He's our correspondent.
You just love Kiryu like the rest of us.
Oh my God,
who doesn't love Kiryu?
He doesn't, yeah.
He's kind of
daddy.
I mean, I'm here to gamble in Japan and respect women, and I'm all out of gambling.
I mean, we've said it before, he's kind of a doofus like Geralt, and I think that's one of the reasons I like him. Like, he finds himself in trouble and is a lot of times really behind where he should be, and I think that's why I like him.
Yeah, well, I don't want to cut you off. But,
yeah, no, go ahead.
For too long. But yeah, like, he serves as a really good focus for the player. I've only played Yakuza 0, and it's your copy of the game. Thank you.
There you go.
Like, he's a great, like, cipher through which to view the game, because he's goofy and has a personality, but he's relatively normal compared to literally everything else you encounter in that game.
Yeah.
So it's very like Arrested Development before it became terrible and awful, in that, like, you have this character who is relatively normal but has his own personality. And by banging him up against all the other weird stuff, that's where most of the humor and drama comes from.
Yep. So before we talk about Kiwami 2, I did want to give a little bit of an update on Yakuza 0. That was, I reviewed the PC port version, and whoo boy, that PC port was in some really bad shape when it first came out. Which was kind of bewildering to me, and I know that it's always like your mileage may vary when it comes to PC gaming, but when everybody is complaining about a save bug, like, oh, the game is not saving properly, And that's a common complaint that took 3 patches to fix. I kind of had a hard time with a lot of news outlets and review sites being like, oh yeah, the port's great. I'm like, did you lose 3 hours of progress? Because I certainly did. And I can recreate it over and over again, and my weapons turned into salads. Like it was
working as intended.
It is much better now. The game actually loads and quits properly and seems to be saving properly. So they are putting time into it. And granted, they were taking a game that was originally designed for PS3, then came out on PS4 at the same time. It was a cross-platform game, and then bringing it to PC. I mean that is something that should be applauded, but that version was in really, really bad shape. And now I would say Yakuza 0 is almost there. It's still got some quirks and some problems, but the PC version is much, much better. Yakuza Kiwami 2 ended up surprisingly being my favorite Yakuza game so far. It runs on the Yakuza 6 Dragon engine, so very physics-based combat, not nearly as arcadey. But it brings all of the good from Yakuza 6, which was I preferred that fighting system. I know some people will say I'm crazy, but the Yakuza games have always been good and bad about fighting, and I think Yakuza 6 was more bad than good. And all the interlocking systems of like, oh, you have 5 different types of experience points, and eating gives you this style, and playing in the batting cages gives you this style of XP, and they all funnel into making Kiryu stronger. All that really, really good stuff from Yakuza 6 with a better story. I think Yakuza 6's story could have been a little bit better. Yakuza Kiwami 2, which is a remake of Yakuza 2, gives us an absolutely fantastic antagonist in Ryuji. And when I was playing it, I was like, okay, so every Yakuza game should have a big antagonist for Kiryu to play off of. And it's
the blonde guy.
Yeah, the blonde guy, the big blonde guy who they gave him kind of a southernish accent in his dialogue to distinguish that he's kind of a country bumpkin in a lot of ways compared to Kiryu. They kind of I think you guys can speak to this better than I could. They kind of constantly talk about how Soten Bori is kind of the Styx compared to Kamurocho. Like it's weird, and as somebody who doesn't know enough about Japan to really understand all that, it played off a little weird in the dialogue, but I got what they were going for. Like, this dude's a little bit more brash. He's a little bit more like it's like a South Carolina mobster versus a Boston mobster, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the one from Boston is competent. The one from South Carolina doesn't exist.
Well, you're allowed to say that. You're from South Carolina.
Technically, I'm from Boston.
I did not know that, and I learned something today. But Kiwami,
Massachusetts, you knew that.
I actually did not know that. I learn something new about you every day. I think Kiwami 2 benefits from having a really good story, a really good antagonist. It has a little bit of fat in the middle, but not nearly as much as the original Yakuza or Yakuza Kiwami, the remake. And I think Steven will probably be able to speak to this as he plays more Yakuza 0. Yakuza 0 is a lot of Yakuza, and it has some major pacing issues where I don't think Kiwami 2 has that problem at all.
Yeah, I've only played a couple of hours of Yakuza 0. And I already think there's too much Yakuza. Like, I know all the Yakuza fans would be mad at me because, like, it's great that we're getting them all. And they're all incredibly well localized because of that Team Rocks. There's just too much. Like, there's too many games. Like, I can't play 4 900-hour Yakuza JRPGs in a year, much less in, like, the 6-month period they've come out in or whatever. It feels like they all came out at once.
And Fist of the North Star right around the corner. But Yakuza
I don't know what that is, but yeah. I mean, I know it's an anime, but like
Yakuza 0 kind of suffered from, like, I like the 2 protagonists, but going back and forth between their stories was kind of jarring. There were downtime moments. I don't like the way that upgrade system worked, where, like, if you do not engage in the 2 main mini games in that game, at a certain point you just can't upgrade your characters anymore. So they kind of force you to take part in the hostess mini game and the real estate, which is fun, and I'm glad that I took the time to do them, but I think forcing the player to do it was kind of weird, and Yakuza Kiwami 2 gets around that. I just felt like Yakuza Kiwami 2 had the best of everything. It all the systems worked really well together. The combat, they decided to kind of put a bullet on put a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, because now you can just bring weapons into combat, which you couldn't do in Yakuza 6, and it trivializes most of the encounters. Like almost every major boss encounter in that game that I know would have had me throwing the controller against the wall, I just whipped out a wooden katana and like just downed the enemy in like 3 attacks. And I felt like that was deserved at this point, because the Yakuza boss battles oscillate between fairly good, if too hard, to dear Christ, this is the worst encounter I've played in my life and I don't want to play this game anymore. Like where you're fighting enemies that just ignore your attacks and behave incoherently and break rules. There's a boss fight in Yakuza Kiwami 1, Derek, that I would recommend you never play.
Like it was the boss, or makes the game a non-recommendation?
It almost makes the game a non-recommendation. Like it was such a poorly designed boss that it felt like it feels like nobody play tested it.
Can you skip it?
No. It's right at the end of the original Yakuza. It is you versus a big boss and 2 of his little henchmen, and everybody has guns, and we all know how Kiryu reacts whenever he gets shot.
Not to undermine you here, Rob, but you also told me that the end of Prey Moon Crash made it not worth playing, and you changed your mind on that.
We're going to get to Prey in a few minutes. No, it's not that the ending makes it unplayable. It's just I wish someone had warned me about it. We're going to get there. But Kiwami 2, most of the encounters are really good. There's maybe only a handful of bosses that I thought were kind of cheap. But then I just whipped out I was like, oh, you're going to use a weapon? Well, I guess I'll use a weapon and knock your damn teeth in. But I did fight the final boss of the game with my fists, and it was incredibly satisfying. So in terms of Yakuza games, you've had 0, Kiwami 6, and Kiwami 2. I enjoyed Kiwami 2 the most. It felt like the most fully featured Yakuza game without having too much padding. But I think all 4 of those games are fantastic in their own way, with the exception of Kiwami. I have a hard time recommending that. The only downside with Kiwami 2 is you need to have played the original game to understand what the hell's going on. It is like the second season of The Wire. Like, you should know these characters. You should know all of their interactions. You should know, like, the big players in the series. If you jump into Kiwami 2, I think you're going to be really lost.
And whereas Zero or Kiwami 1 are both great starting points, because one is like a prequel that came out later. Yep. And Kiwami's a remake of 1. So
yep, and Kiwami, they put some new cutscenes in that flesh out the main antagonist of Kiwami 1, which is really cool, especially after you've played 0. But like Kiwami 2 is just like, this is the season premiere of the second season of Yakuza. You should probably know what's going on. So like there is a recap video in Kiwami 2, but I think you might want to go onto YouTube or read some wikis to feel the full story. Yakuza Kiwami 2 was fantastic. Very, very highly recommended. Kind of a shame that it came out right the week before Dragon Quest XI, because I think everybody kind of forgot about it, but it is fantastic and totally worth it.
Well, I mean, also, what else came out the week of Dragon Quest XI? Zone of the Enders, The Second Run of Mars, which I had no idea.
Starring Dingo.
Dingo Egret.
What a name. What a name.
And Ellie from Xenogears, as Caitlin pointed out earlier.
Pretty much, right? Yeah, so timing may have been a factor there, but I know that there's kind of like a diehard cult following of Yakuza at this point, so I'm sure a lot of those people picked it up.
Yeah, and people went nuts for Yakuza 0 on PC. That there was a listing about Yakuza. No, it was a conference call for Sega where they talked about bringing 6 to PC. Kiwami's around the corner on PC. I think that like Sega has realized, wow, we have this great localization team that can bang out these Yakuza games very quickly and do a really good job. That's the other piece. And then there's like this PC community that's really interested in them. So there's kind of never been a better time to be a Yakuza fan. And then the Fist of the North Star, their Yakuza version of the classic anime comes out in October, and that looks like a barrel of fun. You're already drunk. So
yeah, like full disclosure, I know most of the Yakuza localization team, so this might be a bit yeah, right, exactly. Like, this might be self-aggrandizing. Well, not them aggrandizing. But they're all phenomenally talented and like really dedicated to like, they really love Yakuza. I mean, and all the projects they work on. But like, it's very clear you should follow them on Twitter. They talk a lot about the process of working on Yakuza and like memories of it, and like like how they got around certain challenges. And it's a really good look at how because Yakuza is a very distinctly Japanese game, and like I hesitate to say that because there's so much tendency in the industry and in culture in general to be like, Japan is so mysterious and inscrutable and full of culture, like Japanese culture, and it's a place. It's perfectly normal. So I hesitate to say that about a game, but Yakuza is a game that is very steeped in a Japanese cultural moment, or several Japanese cultural moments. And transitioning that to an audience that is not going to be familiar with, like, for example, like the 1980s in Japan and like the bubble economy, like they might know about it, but there are a lot of like particulars that in the way you wouldn't expect somebody to know like 1990s history in the United States very specifically if they weren't from the United States or weren't like, a scholar of it. You would miss that. And so they've done a really great job of making that accessible while not taking away from the uniqueness of it. And I think the best example to me is the way they've basically wrote a bunch of tutorials on how to play Mahjong, because Mahjong is, nothing more needs to be said about that. It's complicated. And I think, people have learned how to play it from the Yakuza tutorials.
Right.
So TLDR, they're great. Follow them on Twitter.
If you want to follow any of them, there's Scott Strichert is kind of like the head, and then there's John Riesenbach and Sam Mullen. And you can probably just Google their names and Twitter with them, and you can find them. And I think most of them are just public Twitter, so you can follow them. So
yeah,
good folks who do good work, and I'm sure there are more people that I didn't name who I'm forgetting. But yeah, check them out. Yeah, so I'm glad that you enjoyed Yakuza Kiwami 2, Rob.
Yeah, and they're gonna do remakes on the PS4 for 3, 4, and 5. 3, I believe, just came out in Japan. And since those games are already localized, I think it's just a matter of time before we get those PS4 remakes over here in the West.
I do know they've changed a lot since the original localizations. I don't remember when the current team started working on them, but like they don't just like.
Oh, I wasn't implying that. I was just saying like you have a baseline.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it's just a matter of time. But yeah, like. It's not a case of like, they're porting things over and, just not changing anything. But there is, precedent.
Yep. Yes. I'm excited for more of them. I need a break. I do feel like I'm a little Yakuza out right now. I haven't
even beaten any of them.
I've beaten up a lot of people in Kamurocho. My fists are a little bloody and bruised, and I need to take a break.
Well, then why don't you leave Kamurocho and go to the moon?
Oh, Jesus. Who wrote the moon rules on my car with a key?
Do you want it done faster or do you want it done right?
I hope they
can laser. The bullet is enormous.
I hope they can see this because I'm doing it as hard as I can.
Dodging is useless.
Oh my God. And all the kids listening to the podcast went, what the hell are they talking about?
I just had a stroke, I think.
Yeah, Rob.
That's what watching that show was like, to be honest.
Maybe don't play this episode for your students.
No, it's of watching Aqua Teen, you can only watch like one episode or two, and then it's like, okay, I've had enough of this.
You start to feel dirty.
Yeah, so Prey Moon Crash, which was the we all kind of knew that the Arcane was teasing some Prey DLC leading into E3, and they kind of teased it for 4 months, which I wouldn't have done that. At one point, everyone was like, "Oh yeah, it's coming out in March," and that was like the beginning teaser for whatever the hell they were doing. So then they announced it during their E3 showcase and released it that night. And Moon Crash is a downloadable piece of content for Prey, and it is a roguelite immersive sim. So you are confined to the moon, a base on the moon, and it's not nearly as large as the base game of Prey. It's not as big as the Talos 1 station, but you have one of 5 characters, I believe, each with their own unique skill sets. So like one character is very, very good with psi powers, one character is kind of your hacker, one character is your big meat shield combat dude. And your task is to get these 5 characters off of the moon base in a single run. Now, where the roguelite element comes in is that certain hazards change based on each starting run. So you start up the simulation, and maybe this one area has high radiation. So that is now a whole new list of problems that you need to face if you go into that area. Maybe this other area doesn't have power. So you need to make a detour to the center of the station, and you need to get these control modules, which are very rare, and you need to bring these over to the central area to repower that station. There are 5 different ways of escaping from the station, hence your main objective of trying to get all 5 people off the station in a single run. And all of these systems are interlinked in that really clever immersive sim way of like, okay, I need to get into this room. Maybe there's a vent for me to get into and I can get into the room this way, or ooh, I can hack the door this way. But now with those new hazards in place, it makes it so that every run of the game feels unique. I love Deus Ex, I loved Prey, but whenever I play those games again, I have a tendency to go back to my original style of play. Like, well, this worked when I played it the first time, I'm now going to do it again when I play the game again. So the replay value is there, but it's kind of not forcing me to think outside the box. Well, now I'm playing as a character that can't hack the door. So I need to think of a new way of getting in there, and that just opened up new possibilities. And this piece of DLC actually ended up being my favorite game of the summer. I played it for like 15 hours until I got to the end credits. There's little pieces of story for each one of the characters, like a main mission objective that you use to flesh out the station and learn things. When you unlock the different powers, they remain constant on your character in the same way that, like in Rogue Legacy, when you upgraded your health pool, you always had an upgraded health pool in every subsequent run. That takes a little bit of the difficulty out of the game. Like, the game is stupid hard when you first start playing it. Like, it's super dangerous. It almost feels like a survival horror game. Like, you're like carefully like, oh god, I don't want to use the shotgun right now. Like, I'm totally worried I'm going to need it later. And that's kind of where I think the game was at its best. And as you unlock powers, you don't become a god, but you become much more powerful, much more capable. But in the background, there is a timer that is slowly increasing that ups the damage and level of all of the enemies should you take too long. So it's this really good push-pull of immersive sim, roguelite, a little bit of survival horror management. It just ended up being this amazing experience that I think I ended up liking more than the base game of Prey.
Yeah,
oh, wow.
It sounds more compelling to me.
Coming from you, because you loved
I really enjoyed Prey. The last 10% of that game, notwithstanding, where everything kind of came off the rails, and the one guy, Raphael, and I cannot pronounce his last name, the director of Prey, actually apologized for that in a Kotaku podcast. He's like, yeah, we didn't play test the end of that game very well. Sorry about that. I really liked Prey, but this was so much more compelling.
Because Rob doesn't like the end of any game.
That is not true. I don't like the end of Final Fantasy. No, I like the end of Final Fantasy 9. I'll be nice to you. I like the end of Final Fantasy 9. I want to be your canary, Steven. Come on, that was pretty good.
Get down on one knee. Where's the ring?
No, it was funny, but I was putting water. I was filling up a cup of water, so I had to mute it, and I couldn't respond to you.
Okay. It was just the silence was deafening. No, I think it was more compelling because there was always that level of danger, and it ended up making me think like, okay, I got this participant out with this escape route. How am I going to get this one out of here, knowing what I know about this current build of the station? And so I was like actually pausing the game and like sitting down and writing down in a notebook, okay, I need to go over here. I need to make sure I get this food because I need this for this escape route, and oh crap, there's no power in this area. How am I going to get through this? It was a really special experience. That said, the game does one thing exceptionally stupidly, which drove me absolutely nuts. So there is an overarching story, and once you complete every objective in your quest log, the game throws you into a finale cutscene and auto saves right before it, and the game only has one save slot. So I was looking forward to like exploring the station without having to worry about any of the objectives, because I'm like, oh, I've beaten the game fully. I can just walk around the station now, and if I die, it's no big deal. But I actually have like a completed save game, and if I ever want to play Moon Crash again, I'm just going to have to restart the whole thing. That was... Arcane has had this problem with New Game Plus in all of their games. Like the original Dishonored didn't have New Game Plus. Dishonored 2, they eventually patched it in like 6 months later. Prey, it took over a year for it to get New Game Plus. So I don't know who it is at Arcane that I need to hit upside the head with a phone book, but like this is one of those, like, I absolutely loved this game and I was really looking forward to like now exploring the station and seeing all those side stories that, because there was a timer in the background, I was really nervous about exploring. It almost feels like it was a punishment. Like I beat the game and now I'm punished, and if I ever want to do all that stuff, I have to completely restart, and that means re-getting all my upgrades, re-getting all the blueprints in the game. That's
because you're playing the specially tailored Rob Steinman edition, where they do punish you and only you.
Apparently, because like nobody,
just like his version of Dragon Quest.
There's like only one complaint about it on the Bethesda forum. So apparently I'm like, me and this other dude were the only ones to beat this game and run into this problem. Like it's a real shame, because I think overall, in terms of immersive sims, it shows a really cool future for the genre. The way that if you remember, Mankind Divided had that Ripper thing, like the God, what were those things called? Those little mini missions in like the super CG world.
The like augmented, or not augmented reality, but like the fake VR in-game VR thing.
Which
wasn't called Ripper or something?
Yeah,
but the people, I think, were Rippers. The hackers.
Yes. Breach
yes.
was what it was called. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Which also, strangely enough, had the best control scheme in the game, and I don't know why they didn't just make that the default control scheme, but whatever. But Breach never really did it for me in the same way that Mooncrash did, because it felt so artificial. Whereas this feels like a living, breathing, immersive sim that changes up some variables from now and then. Also, there's a Tremors reference in this piece of DLC, and that's a love letter to me and my wife, because we love those movies. Well, we love that movie. The rest of the Tremor series sucks. But like, there's a giant moon shark typhon wandering around the main hub area, and like you have to jump from rock to rock, because if you land on it, it will like burrow out of the ground and try to eat you, and it's like this super dangerous enemy. That was awesome. And they reference it. They're like, yeah, it's like from that movie from the 90s with Kevin Bacon. And I'm like, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Awesome.
It's a really awesome piece of DLC. Caitlin, I know you liked Prey, and I think you would love this.
Okay, so I have some questions.
Yeah, no, I want to answer questions. I don't want to just talk for 20 minutes.
Yeah, okay. Are you the prey or the enemies the prey? No.
We're praying for the enemies, Stephen.
Pray for the
thoughts and pray.
That's a different game. So okay, just to clarify, is this the same station from the main game, or is this a totally different new environment?
No, this is a totally new environment. It has its own look and its own feel.
Okay, and is it comparable in size?
No. It's much smaller, but it's also much more intimate, if that makes sense. Like, I think I replayed all of Prey right before I played through Mooncrash. I did a New Game Plus route, and I would say like 2/3 of the environments of Talos 1 are really, really good, and then there's maybe 1/3 that's kind of eh.
Mm-hmm.
This is like the whole thing is brilliantly realized, and because it's so dangerous, it starts to feel like the Spencer Mansion from Resident Evil, where it's like, I know this hallway and I know where I need to go, but you've changed up some variables, and that's what makes it really, really cool.
Okay, good. Okay, so then my other question is, so you're going through this multiple times trying to figure out how to get everyone out. How long on average would you say an attempt is in terms of game? Like,
not very long at all. Very bite-sized, like maybe 20-30 minutes.
Oh wow.
Getting all 5 out it only maybe took me an hour and a half to do it, like a dedicated, I'm going to get all 5 of these people out. But that was after lots and lots of attempts, like well over 10 hours of gameplay of me like finding blueprints that then you can use at the start of a run to print new weapons. They have a tiered system there, so like you'll get a better version of the shotgun that does like fire damage, so a little bit more RPG mechanics there. And then also upgrading your psychic abilities and your overall abilities, those remain as well. So when you have hacking 1, and on a specific character, you're not going to be able to get through as much of the station, so you're taking things a lot slower. But then by the time you get, hacking 3, that opens up a lot more environment, and that'll make it maybe faster for you to get to your objective.
That sounds really cool.
It's really, really, it is hard as hell at the start, though. Like, the game outright kills you the first time you load it up. And then after that, like, you're playing as a very psychic based character with a very low health pool, but super powerful psychic abilities that you haven't unlocked yet. So it plays into that. I played the Resident Evil remake again over the summer because I'm an idiot and I love that game. And that's how I felt. Like, I felt
so good.
It's so good. I felt so weak at the start of the game, but I really liked it for that reason. And it made every upgrade feel super valuable after that.
Okay. And then I guess my last question is, how does this at all play into the story and the twist, which we won't talk about? But...
I don't want to give it away, but there's some really cool implications. They didn't bring back the same voice actor who played your brother, which was super jarring. Like, he's in the game, but they weren't going to pay him the big bucks to bring him back. But there are story bits connected to the main game of Prey. And then there's an ending which kind of has me wondering where they're going to go with the franchise next. I think if this mode had been included with the game, the review scores would have been significantly higher. Like, this is a mode that's like, holy crap, this is fantastic.
Cool.
It's really good. It was secretly like the best game I played this summer, and no one really talked about it. Now, that said, if you don't like roguelikes, if you don't like replaying parts of the game over and over again, and it's not a roguelike like Shiren the Wanderer or anything like that, but if you don't like sort of being in the same environment and having like little variables here and there, it's not going to win you over. But if you like immersive sims and you like constantly being that, like, one time, oh my God, I have to tell this story. So I was going to escape using the escape pod, which is like the easiest way to do it. But when I checked a computer, it said the escape pod needed a navigation chip. And I was like, okay, I need to locate a navigation chip. So I had to go all the way to the other side of the moon base to get the navigation chip. This whole time, the timer is running. The enemies are getting more and more powerful. So it goes from, I'm fairly competent and I can survive, to, holy crap, they're going to murder me as soon as they see me. I get the navigation chip. I get over to the one place that has the escape pod. The power's out. So I'm like, okay, I just need to make it to the escape pod. So I'm like moving my way through this environment. I can't open any of the doors, and I don't have the strength to open them manually. So I had to like use the glue gun, make a stairwell up to a vent. And like, I get all the way up to the vent, and I get in through the room, and I get into the main area that has the escape pod. And there's like a big giant enemy in there, and I managed to kill it just barely. I got like 10% health. I get up to the escape pod. I put the navigation chip in. And then I realized, well, the escape pod's not going to run because there's no power in this room. And if you've ever watched the Night of the Living Dead remake from the 90s, where the guy finds the keys to the car just as he's starting to die, and like the candle in the room slowly starts to go out, and he's just laughing to himself, that's what happened to me as the enemies started coming for me. And I just started laughing because I was like, I'm an idiot. And I could have escaped had I powered this room, but I didn't. And
he's a physics teacher, people.
Yeah, I am. And sweet death came for me, and I was laughing the whole time. Like, it was just this really awesome piece of storytelling that came because of the immersive sim nature of the game.
So the enemies are like actively hunting you?
Well, like, so when the timer is based on levels. And so, like, when I got to that escape pod, I was just starting to get to like level 3 on the enemies. And so now they are just stupid powerful, and they all regenerate at that point.
Oh.
So now, instead of fighting like, basic mimics, like, oh no, now there's like really dangerous stuff all over the place. And I couldn't leave. Like, I couldn't get out of that room. Like, I had no health. And so I just looked around and I was like, YOLO, and I just got killed. It was awesome. It was so, and this was like an hour. This was an hour of me like painstakingly doing this and then just staring at the game like, oh, you bastards. Oh, you complete bastards.
But like a good, I mean, like that. That could be frustrating for some people.
But it actually felt really good. It felt deserved. It felt deserved. Like, well, of course the escape pod's not going to do anything. The power's out, Steinman. Like it was awesome. It's a really Derek. I think you would really dig this because it's a super intimate experience, and I think it shows something that we could do with the immersive sim going forward.
All right.
Well, I guess on that point, do you need the base game to play this?
I think you do. I think
not that that's a bad thing.
Yeah, you do.
Prey is a great game, and you should play it. But
I should play it. I should play it. The DLC because once again through Steam sharing I have Rob's copy of it.
I was gonna say I just refused to buy it on PS4 as a thing because I played the PS4 version briefly and I think I played the demo and the controls just like turned me off so much.
They did a much better job with the controls and they finally fixed the controller input problems on the PC version. It only took them a year.
I don't want to play a first-person game with a controller, period.
I think so I've always gone back and forth on this. If it's a very heavy shooting game based around accuracy, I obviously want to use a mouse. But if it's like a stealth game, like a Dishonored or a Deus Ex, I'm actually okay with using a controller because I like the analog sense of movement. Like in Deus Ex, I'm never shooting somebody. Like I'm sneaking up behind them and I'm choking them out. So like I want that. Like the ability to vary to have my movement based on my controller input, if that makes sense. But I hear you.
But yeah, I just don't. I don't know. I guess it's personal preference. Just can't. It's like me and touch controls, or virtual buttons rather. Yeah. Virtual buttons. I never want them. I don't care. Yeah. I just don't want them.
Hate them.
Sorry, not sorry. Really, just.
But Prey's really good, man. Moon Crash was absolutely phenomenal. I hope Arcane continues to make immersive sims. They talked about multiplayer stuff, and I was like, no.
Yeah, no.
Just hire some writers and make more immersive sims because your writing is good-ish and needs to be better.
Well, it sounds like they at least
that is a glowing endorsement,
right?
I think Prey plays around with some really interesting ideas, but doesn't quite stick to landing. I think Moon Crash is better in that regard because it doesn't aspire to be anything meaningful. It's just a fun immersive sim.
Yeah, I was gonna say at least it sounds like they changed the sort of like base structure of the gameplay enough to make it interesting and compelling.
Yeah, it's cool. I really wish more people played it. I get why they did the whole like E3 surprise launch, but I think the game got completely drowned out in all the craziness of E3.
Oh yeah, I forgot this existed until you brought it up today. So
yep, it's great.
Good. Well, I'd like to toss the mic over to Steven for at least one game. I want to hear about his experience playing Divinity Original Sin 2, because okay, shut up. I seriously cannot. I cannot distinguish Divinity Original Sin from Pillars of Eternity. In my mind, they're the same game. Yeah, I just I know that they're like, I haven't looked too much into either one. It's just that when I hear the title of one of those, I'm like, which one is that? Because they're both basically isometric Western RPGs made in like a classic mold. Pillars of Eternity way more so than Divinity, because I know Divinity has like tactical combat, right?
Yes.
Yeah, well, it has tactical combat, and like, you know, Divinity is not. It's like sort of isometric, but like it has a movable camera, like whereas Pillars is like pre-rendered backgrounds that are pretty. My editor asked me about these two games the other day too, because he wanted to play one of them and he wasn't sure which one he'd like better. And like, I'm sure Rob would agree with this. Pillars of Eternity is very traditional. If you like the Baldur's Gate style, Pillars of Eternity is Baldur's Gate with modern conveniences. Like, it's faster, controls are a little less fiddly, the interface is less obtuse, and there are a lot of like concessions made with a mind for how modern tabletop games now are less rigid in terms of their rule sets, and, you know, basically to make it so you're not just, you know, in Baldur's Gate you could end up in a situation with a lot of like with mages and stuff where it's like, oh, I have no spells, all I can do is whack people with a stick that I miss with all the time. That doesn't happen in Pillars, and especially in Pillars 2 because of how they've built the classes. The setting and story in Pillars are also very Forgotten Realms, Dungeons and Dragons. I really enjoyed it, but I think it's less exciting than Divinity.
Okay, I was gonna say, do you think one or the other? Would you say that Pillars has like a stronger narrative focus?
I would say Pillars has a more focused narrative.
Okay.
Because Pillars is more linear. It's not completely linear, but like there is a distinct. These are the quests you do. They have 3 outcomes. It's more. It's almost more like a JRPG in that like there is a very clear place you're being funneled to, and there's a clear way that situation is going to end. Divinity, and especially Divinity 2, especially having just beaten it, it's incredibly open-ended in terms of like there are like 50 ways a quest can end, and some of them are actually, it's very much like playing tabletop where sometimes a quest can end and it's kind of unsatisfying. It's like the person you were trying to help got murdered off screen and this quest is over. And you can get to the finale and like people that you've interacted with in the finale will show up, and some of them can be missing, and it's not in a like Mass Effect-y kind of way where it's clear they had to very systemically design to be like, yes, is the 1 or the 0 flipped here for whether or not this character's there, and did you help them or were you mean to them? Like, it's much more dynamic in terms of how you interact with people, and it plays a lot more like a tabletop game in that like the choices you make maybe won't affect the ultimate outcome of the universe, although you do get to make choices to that regard too. But it's more like crafting an experience that's around your choices on that more micro level of like I helped this character, but I helped them in this certain way. Like, they wanted me to get them a knife, but I got them a spoon and taught them to be a chef. And then they showed up later and they were a chef. But then the friends they made being a chef showed up too. So it's very reactive to that. Basically, Divinity is more about never saying no to whatever way you want to warp the system. Whereas Pillars is more like, this is a Baldur's Gate style RPG where you can choose to be mean, you can choose to be nice, or you can choose to be wacky. There's a little more depth to it in Pillars. I don't want to sell Pillars short. I personally, as a game, vastly prefer Divinity. A, because the co-op is phenomenal, and because of the combat. And that comes into the skill system. It's very, very open-ended. So it's turn-based, whereas Pillars is running on a turn-based system, but in real time. So like your character, if you have this much initiative, you get this many actions per cycle. And so there's a lot of pausing. So
yeah,
it's, some people find that kind of jarring. It can be very strategic, but it's also kind of seedy or pantsy. In Pillars, and I like it, so I stress I'm not saying this necessarily as a criticism. Pillars is very like, I paused and I selected my party and I had them all attack that guy. Or I paused and I selected my party and I had them all use their special attack on that guy. Whereas Divinity is much more like, if you think of like Fallout with a party, old Fallout, where it's like, it's my turn. I have 6 AP. My skills cost 2. My skills cost 3. Moving costs, it's based, so it's much more like, which of my cool skills can I use in this turn? And like, as a co-op game, there's so much working with your teammate. Cause like, for example, I played with Miyoko, my partner. She played a polymorphing thief and a giant tank broadsword lady. And I played an archer and a wizard who can like move people around the battlefield and use a lot of elements. So like, there was a lot of like, okay, with her heavy character, she can break this character's armor. And then now the character's armor is broken. So I can turn them, I can teleport them somewhere else away from the fight. Or, I can break magical armor. So I break the magical armor, and then she has a polymorph move that turns them into a chicken. So, like, there's a lot of, like, and then, like, the elements interact. So, like, if you have an earth wizard who, like, leaves, or an earth warrior who leaves oil on the ground, if you shoot fire at oil, it blows up. But if people walk on the oil, they get slowed and they trip. And so, basically, they take these core elemental systems, and the way you interact with them is what sort of creates your combat strategy. So there's a lot of really neat stuff of like, oh yeah, I made a wall out of oily vines, in this building, and the enemies couldn't get to me. So they just straight up couldn't get to me. And then at the end of the wall, I shot fire at it and it blew up and damaged the enemy. So it's very like physics based and very like managing a limited pool of resources. Honestly, this is going to sound like a weird pandery reference. It's like when you have the special meter in Skies of Arcadia, where every character, you have so much AP per turn, and that's a really finite resource, but like making good use of your AP and all your skills, because there are lots of skills, because you're not bound by like a class. You can kind of like learn whatever you want. There's a lot of like, okay, in this turn I have 6 AP. So first I'm going to buff myself, then I'm going to try to break that character's armor, and then I'm going to move them to set them up for my next character's attack. And it's like Final Fantasy X, where it has the turn order. So like, you can try to knock an enemy down before their turn. And, there's a lot of like you managing the battlefield. It's not just like run in and whack everybody. And it's pretty challenging, I would say, even on the core difficulty, which now there's an easier story difficulty mode, which I actually think is a great addition. And I don't say this to dunk on Rob. I say this legitimately. You might enjoy it on the story difficulty, because it's actually still challenging. But like for example, in the main game, your resurrection scrolls they're not finite, but like they are a resource. So like death can be pretty big. Until later in the game when you can buy a lot of them. Whereas in the story mode, your characters all just learn a skill, an infinite use skill that lets them revive people. So
can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, no.
No, and I definitely I know Steven's not dunking on me with this game.
It's a very hard game.
Yeah, with Divinity Original Sin 1, Steven and I played it together at E3 when they were doing their enhanced edition, and we had a really awesome time with the developers. We were playing like the couch co-op, and then we played a few times online, but when you're an adult and you both have jobs, finding time is incredibly difficult. And like I think it's awesome that Steven was able to play with Miyoko, to play with his partner. Like that's like an optimum situation to play this game, like together playing it. Every time I have tried one of these Divinity games, they are so bone-crunchingly hard, especially at the beginning, that I just bounced off of them. Like especially with Divinity 1, and I think
Divinity 1 is much, much harder in the beginning, because it's like
if you don't,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
If you don't fight these like certain enemy encounters in the right order, I mean, they're not random, they are fixed on the map. If you do not fight them in the right order, you will not level up properly to the point where you can easily get by them. Now, there are always ways of getting around things. Like I've seen videos of people like setting up traps outside of combat and like, okay, I'm going to make this poison area over here, or I'm going to light this on fire, so when the combat starts, they're going to move over here. And on the one hand, I love that the game is that open, but on the other hand, it is so fiddly that I'm just like, I don't want this. I want it to be like a Tactics Ogre or a Final Fantasy Tactics, where it's like, I'm going to get into this combat and we're going to have this combat. I don't want to be fiddle effing around with a bunch of things at the start to get the jump on these guys, because if I don't do it, I can't beat them. Now, by contrast, I think Steven is one of those people that loves that fiddliness, that loves that level of interactivity.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, well, I would say, especially in the first one, you're right. Because, like, for example, I think we might have even talked about this back when we were all regulars on the show. In the first one, there are like 9 ways out of town, and 8 of them are full of like deadly murder zombies that if you stab them with slashing weapons, they bleed poison, which heals them. So, and at that point, you might only have 2 people who can only wield swords. So it's like, what do? I can't shoot fire. The second game is way better about that. The first game, I think, is a lot of fun and well worth playing. It's just the curve is very brutal. And I think it's better with the enhanced edition of the first one. But the second one, and especially now with the enhanced edition, because now there's like an entirely new tutorial. Like, it's a narrative tutorial. So like, it used to be you wake up on a boat and then all of a sudden the boat gets attacked and you're like, it's like it nominally teaches you things. Now there is like a new level of the boat, which is optionally skippable, that like, this is how interacting with things works, and this is the expectations we have for how you can work with a quest. And it's a well timed, because it's not like, here is a tutorial, walk forward, press A to move. It's very much like, we're gonna teach you how to play by letting you play, but we're not going to like overwhelm you with stuff. And I think it works really well.
It's a deep, intense RPG for, I mean, it's mind-boggling how much depth there is to this game, but I do think that Larian, and I'm going to give this one a try again at some point. I think Larian has had a hard time figuring out how to bring new people into the fold, like people that did not grow up with these style games. Like Derek, you and I have talked before, and I don't think you grew up with these games. Like you're very similar to me in that respect, right?
Right. Yeah, I didn't really. At most, I played like Septerra Core.
Yeah. And so like I walked into the first Divinity and I just got so slaughtered, and I was like, man, everybody's really talking about how awesome this game is, and I just am getting frustrated, and I know I'm doing something wrong, but I don't feel like the game's telling me. And I actually said that to the developers, and they said, yes, with the enhanced edition we're trying to do a better job of that. And it sounds like with each iteration they are getting better. But it's like that these games are it is so much depth, but man, it is like
I think what it comes down to is that there is a tool set you have, and they don't always explicitly state all of the elements of that tool set, because part of the fun of the game, right, is learning how the things interact. But it can be overwhelming at the beginning when it's like like in the first one, like I said, like as a person who beat the first one several times, it took like 2 playthroughs before I was like, oh, that's why I can't get past these zombies, because when you cut them, they bleed poison. And like that is sort of like almost player hostile. There's nothing. The second one is way more like reined in with that regard, especially because now the first game didn't have armor stats. Like the first game was just like, yeah, if you have armor, you take less damage. Excuse me. The second game is like Mass Effect, where every character has physical armor, magical armor, and then health. And so you put better armor on, your armor number goes up. And so, it's not like the first game where if someone shoots a fireball at you, everyone is on fire and dying and everything is exploding and what's going on, which is funny in a way, but it's also like, oh God, what am I doing? Whereas in the second one, it's like if you get hit by a fireball and you have magic armor, it's just like, oh yeah, it hurt my magic armor. It's not like things don't go sideways quite as quickly. And it's more like there's a logic to it that you can figure out. It's like, okay, I'm in this battle. It's a strategy battle. I have to find there are enemies that have a lot more physical armor than magic armor. So I'm going to send my mages after the guys with low magic armor, because then they can deal damage a little faster. But yeah, so I think the problem that they've had in the past is expecting you to make use of the systems before you have grasped the basics of the systems, let alone the advanced things that the systems can do. And I especially think with the enhanced edition of 2, they introduce you much better to it. But like, now it's not a case of like, yeah, you need 13 elements to manipulate this battle. It's like, no, okay, this is a fight with like 3 thieves, and I know I can knock down, and I have a fire spell, and there's oil on the ground. So like, they'll be like, yeah, that is the situation you're in. And to what you were saying about being fiddly, I definitely think the first one is very fiddly in that like you can really manipulate the conditions of the battle before you go into it. And I did like that. They've maintained that in a way in the second one. They've redesigned a lot of the encounters in the enhanced edition. But there's less of the like, we're going to expect you to like move a bunch of oil barrels around before the fight starts, and more of a like, we have set up a curated battle, and this is what your challenge will be in the battle. Like for example, you walk into like a narrow valley, and there are enemies that spawn on the upper sides of you. So like figuring out how to get the high ground advantage is the thing in that battle. Or, you fight, a bunch of oil blobs in a room full of fire. And so figuring out the battle is how to keep the oil blobs from getting to the fire and blowing everything up.
Now you said that they added a new difficulty level with the definitive edition. So now you have story, explorer, and then classic, and then the tactician Jesus Christ mode.
Yeah, and then honor mode, which is just your save deletes and why.
I'm right now trying to look up the differences between story and explorer mode, because even explorer mode felt a little too like a skosh too hard. Like this feels a little unfair. So I'm like, do I play this? If I give this another shot, should I go with explorer mode or story mode?
I mean, I personally would go with story
You'd
mode.
go with hardcore classic and delete your save.
No. I've actually the only time I've played like the super hard difficulty mode is in the first one, and a little bit in 2. 2 is much more balanced in terms of difficulty. Like the normal difficulty in 2 is a sufficient challenge for the whole game because of how the game scales. Whereas in the first one, it's very easy to quickly, like, it starts out maddeningly difficult, and then you level up a bit and you get access to so many abilities that it becomes almost a joke, because you can just, you can wipe entire enemy groups out with like two well-placed attacks. This one is much more like a gentle curve. It's still difficult. So like, I actually haven't felt the need, excuse me, to jump to the super mega difficulty, which I think is a good thing, because like, I like the challenge. So with story difficulty, I'm trying to pull it up here because I had the like list of what they did to it.
Yeah, I'm looking for it too, and I'm like, where is
it? Well, I guess this isn't like related at all to your current line of thought, but something that I've just been waiting to ask is the obvious question of, it's okay to not play the first one, like narratively.
Yeah, I want to know that too.
Yeah, it's totally okay. So they do that thing that I like a lot of games. If you play the first one, there are some characters you'll recognize because it's thousands of years later. Okay. So there are similar proper nouns. There are a couple characters
of years in the future.
Like the magical power in the world is called Source. That is the thing in the first game. And if you've played the first game, you'll appreciate certain side quests a little more. But this story is 100% self-contained. All the factions you deal with are limited to this game. It's just like occasionally be like, oh, I remember that imp from the first game, or like, oh, I remember that concept from the first game. But like, my partner and I played it, and she hadn't played the first one, and we were able to follow the story. This one also has much better character stories. This is in the original release too of the second one, but you can either make your own character and give them like narrative tags like noble, scholar, outlaw, or you can play as one of the party members you can recruit in the game who have their own like elaborate quest lines. And if you want, you could play with an entire party of 4 of those characters. You don't have to create a character if you don't want to. And their stories are actually really good. They all tie well into the main narrative. With the enhanced edition, they've updated a couple of those stories to actually make them a little better and tie in even more. And then they rewrote the story of the entire third chapter, because the third act, even as someone who played it, I was like, what the hell's going on? Because there are a lot of factions in play. They rewrote it to make that much clearer, and by all accounts, it seems to be a lot tighter now, which is good. But yeah, anyway, to answer your question, you do not need to play the first one. And in fact, as much as I love the first one, I would recommend most people just start with 2, because it's a more balanced game. It's a more comprehensible game. And like, I think there actually it's worthwhile to go back and play the first one if you end up liking the second one. But no, you don't need to play the first one.
Okay.
That's good to know, because I was looking at both this Divinity Original Sin 2 and Pillars of Eternity earlier this year, and I started with Pillars of Eternity, and I need to get back to that and finish it. But I've been interested in both, and the idea of wow, 4 games to play through,
none of them are short.
Yeah, like I want to, but I don't have time. So it's good to hear that if you're interested, you can just start with the second one, no problem.
And the new console release is good for that. And I would actually say it's funny because Pillars, having played both Pillars games, I don't think you need to play the first one for Pillars, but it's way more like the sequel is a direct continuation. You play the same character like in the old Baldur's Gate games. So I actually think Pillars has a little bit more of a barrier to entry if you haven't played the first one.
It's kind of weird because I felt like with Pillars and Divinity, I was running into the same problem where I felt completely overwhelmed, but I felt it 2 different ways. Like Pillars, what happened to me was I was playing it, and it was like the 3rd or 4th time I was trying it, and it was like, okay, I'm starting to get a rhythm here. And then when they dropped the first chanter on me, and there were like 10 different skills, and I'm like reading them, and I was like, okay, I'm done. Like, you just dropped a brand new character class on me, no introduction, no nothing, and now I have no idea how to use this character in combat. Whereas with Divinity, I felt like I had a very limited tool set. And so when the game started letting me like upgrade my character, I didn't know which way to go. So it was like Pillars was overwhelming me with too much information, and then Divinity was being like coy.
Yeah, I will say Divinity is never going to say like this is what you should do, because in a way there really isn't a right answer.
Sure.
There are skills that you want to have, like you probably want to have a healing skill. But like with Divinity, especially in 2, because of how the skill system works, they're all kind of equally useful at dealing damage in some fashion. So, and because it's very easy to respec, like you get past the prologue and then you can respec every element of your character for the rest of the game at any time you want with no penalty. So there's more of a, like, you should experiment because you might find something you like. You might like being a spear character who can grow wings and jump across the battlefield, which, side note, is awesome. The polymorph skill tree is great because, like, polymorph can be something that is, like, your main thing. Like, you turn into a bull and charge into people. Or it can be like, oh, yeah, this gave me, I polymorphed my skin into iron and now I'm an awesome tank. Or, like, Miyoko was a thief, so she had a lot of, like, she could do like a tentacle whip that, like, disabled enemies' arms so they couldn't wield weapons, and then as a thief she could be around them more safely without getting hit by, like, people's, like, super swords and stuff.
Okay.
It's a game series I really want to get into.
To answer your question, by the way, Rob, so I looked it up. The new story mode, so it gives your whole party a bunch of stat bonuses, and basically they rebalanced the defense and vitality stats of enemies, basically to make it so ultimately you are always at an advantage, and that, like, you can, but it's not like brain, like brick easy, but, like, the enemies are not going to, like, hit you and kill you in half of it and almost kill you in one hit. You get the resurrection skill, which means you can revive people at any time, and they give you a talent that is normally costs something, where you can flee any fight in the game you want if you accidentally run into, like, a high level enemy that you can't beat, which in the original game you needed to have a certain talent to escape fights.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like they've done a lot. I mean, just accessibility across the board, right?
Yeah, that's their big thing. And I think that's their thing with all their console releases, is that, like, they try to, like, make it a more friendly game, like, if you might sit down on the couch with 2 controllers and play. And it does have great split screen.
And that's the way I want to play it too, is if I am going to get it, I feel like I want to grab which surprises me because the control scheme worries me, but I've heard that they've made it work very well for the PS4 for multiplayer. So
yeah, I played the first one on console as well. Like, I really liked it. So I played it twice on PC and twice on console. It's a complicated game, right? So, like, it's not like you are going to use 3 buttons and succeed. It's not like a Diablo conversion where, like, they did that. But it's direct control, so, like, you move your character with the analog stick, which feels great. But they have added a lot of concessions that make it less, like, fiddly. Like, on the PC version, you hold Alt to highlight objects you can interact with, and you can click on them. On console and on PC, if you plug a controller in, you can, like, hold the X button, and it makes, like, a circle appear underneath you. And everything that's targetable around you will pop up in a list. So that way you can just, like, if there are a bunch of items, I can just grab them all at once. I don't have to, like, go and check every, body or every chest.
Right.
And I think that, I find that they work pretty well.
Good. Well, I think I'll probably check out the PS4 version, if anything.
Play it in co-op if you can. It's super fun.
Yeah, I'm sure that my boyfriend would be super into that. We played a lot of Diablo co-op on the couch, and it was a lot of fun. So
I feel like that's the way to play that game, is co-op. At one point
I've never played single player in any of them. So
yeah, I was like, Steven, can you just take control of the other 3 characters? Because I already feel overwhelmed with one. Like that's how I felt, because you're playing 4 complete characters that you can completely flesh out, and that's rough on a guy that kind of grew up with JRPGs where, I don't have to assign HP in Dragon Quest. The game does it for me. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's not like Final Fantasy IV had 5 characters in your party. Oh
my God. Did you really
it's too much for Rob. He's overwhelmed.
You really just put Divinity on the same level as Final Fantasy IV? Like,
no, you're right. Divinity is a much better game. You're right.
Wow.
Ooh.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
That rub turned into a burn.
I've never played Final Fantasy IV, so I can't speak to it.
Wait, what?
I've never played Final Fantasy IV.
What?
What?
Like, was Cecil the Dark Knight?
Why would I play 4 when I played
with
6?
Seesaw the Dark Knight?
Seesaw. Okay, that's
Whitakers.
I didn't know you hadn't played that. Now who's the Spoony Bard?
Apparently me.
Not you. Okay, well, I'm going to move the topic to one more game that I wanted to discuss today, and I think I'm the only one who's played it, so you just get to hear me ramble for a smidgen of a moment. So Axis Games did a thing where they decided to release 3 Otome visual novel games. Otome games, if you're not aware, are the ones where you generally play as a girl, and it's like a visual novel wherein you can choose to romance one of a handful of guys as part of the story.
Beautiful boys.
Yes. So they decided to release
about them, though.
3 of these. Of course you don't. Release 3 of these over the course of like 3 months this summer, and they got basically no press or marketing as far as I'm aware. I knew about them through word of mouth, and just because I follow new releases of games that I may be interested in. They released in the order of, the first one was Psychedelica of the Black Butterfly, which is like I guess, is it suspenseful? It's like a mystery game.
Yeah, suspense mystery.
Yeah, so you play as a girl who awakens in a mysterious mansion, and she encounters several young men trapped in the same predicament, and they have to hunt these black butterflies and claim kaleidoscope shards from the horrific monsters surrounding them. I'm reading this from the back of the box. So that released in
Not familiar to me at all.
Right, you wouldn't know, right?
Nope.
Then the month after or so, they released Seven Scarlet, which is another mystery otome game. The description on the back of this box says, a year ago, in a mysterious town shaped like the crescent moon, Ichiko's older brother vanished without a trace. Today, she returns, determined to find answers. And then basically, like, she joins the supernatural detective club, and they try to track down her missing brother. And that one released after Psychedelica. And then finally, the third one was Psychedelica of the Ashen Hawk, which is, I guess, like a thematic continuation of Black Butterfly. I don't know if it's like a direct sequel or what.
There are similar thematic elements, but to say too much would be kind of spoilery.
Okay, got it.
And that's all these games have. So
right. So I don't have that one, so I'm not too sure about it. But that was the third to release in the series. And the reason why I bring this up is because I discovered that GameStop, who I dislike patronizing in general, but I decided to on this occasion because they had both Black Butterfly and Seven Scarlet like basically on clearance. Last copies of each one, they're like $20 a piece for the Vita. And I was like, you know what? I want to support these releases and pick them up. So I did. And I have not tried Psychedelica of the Black Butterfly yet, but I have started playing Seven Scarlet. And the reason why I picked that one first of the two is because it's like a standalone game, whereas Psychedelica, as you said, may have some connections. Like Black Butterfly may connect to Ashen Hawk, so I just wanted to kind of like play those back to back if possible.
Yeah.
So anyway, I started Seven Scarlet. I'm not super far into it, maybe like 2.5 hours or so. The first thing that strikes me about this is I think it has really beautiful art, especially the backgrounds are really nice in this game. It takes place in rural Japan, so it evokes a lot of that kind of Persona 4 Inaba vibe. So if you're into seeing like summery Japanese countryside with the sound of cicadas buzzing and all that stuff, then this may kind of evoke that nostalgic feeling for you. I'm not far into it enough to talk about like where the story goes because I don't really know yet. So far, all I've done in the game is you start as the protagonist girl who has her childhood friend, and they're both like at college together, and they decide to journey out to the countryside in search of her, like where her brother was last seen in this little idyllic countryside town. And I've met all of the primary characters, all of whom I know you can romance more or less. Like you can go down a story branch that involves them more than the others. So you've got a kind of like happy-go-lucky pastry chef guy. You've got your very overprotective, to the point of it really bothering me, childhood friend guy. There is a stoic med student who is very aloof. There is a really rude and mean, I think he's like the owner of the hotel where she ends up staying, and he's kind of a jerk. But he's got like his, tsundere allure. And then there's a geeky kind of like, I think he's an otaku, but he's really into cats and like traditional kimono, which is an interesting twist on the otaku trope. So the guys are a little bit more, a couple of them are a little bit more masculine, I guess, or like typically masculine than a lot of otome men are. Usually because otome games are oriented at female players, the male characters tend to be more like bishonen or like kind of soft. And I like some of the designs of the guys in this game a bit more. Like 3 of them, I would say, 3 of the 5 that I believe you can romance are like fairly, they're not even rugged, but I guess I just say like they're more my type. So whatever. Because that's something like sometimes I have a disconnect. Like I like playing otome games plenty, and I like playing other games where you play as a male romancing female characters. It depends on like the script and the characters and everything, right? So there aren't very many games oriented at like gay male players. So there are a couple of them out there, but when I play otome games, that's usually kind of like the closest I can get to being able to romance dudes. So I guess I have opinions about the dudes in the game. So from what I can tell, the ones in Seven Scarlet are a little bit more to my taste than Psychedelica of the Black Butterfly, but both have very nice polished art, and the styles are pretty different too of art in each one. So you may want to check them out if you're interested in mystery visual novels. I've kind of been hankering for a good mystery story recently. My boyfriend picked up for the first time Danganronpa 2, because he played Danganronpa 1 quite a while back, and he was playing it yesterday, and I was just like watching over his shoulder and like internally laughing maniacally because of his reactions to some of these characters, like knowing what happens and him being confused. And he's like, why are they on an island? What the hell is going on? And just me like, you'll see. So I think maybe part of that inspired me to pick up a mystery game. So I would say if you're interested in visual novels with mystery stories or good art, or the otome sort of playing as a girl dating guy games, look for them. Psychedelica of the Black Butterfly, Seven Scarlet, and Psychedelica of the Ashen Hawk. All three are on Vita, and they run like $20 to $30. And I think that as of a couple of days ago, there's a Steam page listing for Psychedelica of the Black Butterfly. So I wouldn't be surprised to see all of these coming to Steam in the near future, because I'm sure they would sell a lot better there.
I would think, yeah, PC is a great Vita being a dead platform, despite what Vita fans would like to tell you.
Yeah. It's not a bad platform. It's just a dead platform in terms
of... Right, like just because you like it and there are games released on it, it is a dead platform.
Not yet. They're totally going to release new Tactics Ogre on it.
That'd be awesome.
I don't even want that at this point.
Wait, no, yeah, I want it on the Switch. I want it on the Switch.
No, on that console. I want the game.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, I don't know if like... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to yell at Derek. I was like, no, we all want Tactics Ogre games.
No, we do.
We want Final Fantasy Tactics 2.
Yes.
Except not hex-based.
Yeah, I guess we don't need to disclaim because it's not like we're telling people, but I totally worked on Psychedelica, so go buy it, I guess. I mean, I don't get any money from it, but, go.
That was part of why I wanted to pick it up to support Steven. So yeah, this is not in any way like a paid endorsement that's sketchy or whatever. I just knew that he had worked on it, and I have another friend who worked on, who Stephen knows as well, who worked on Seven Scarlet. So,
yes, she and I worked on Bad Apple Wars together, which you should also pick up. It has the most beautiful boys.
Yes, I reviewed that one.
This way, Stephen can buy more games, and that way he fulfills his end of the Steam library.
Right? Yeah, true.
He bought Ni no Kuni too. I can't be that upset.
Is it a quid?
Yeah.
Oh, every relationship is, Caitlin, especially mine with Stephen.
Well, I'm just glad that you guys benefit from one another. Symbiosis.
It is.
True.
It is.
Yeah. We are Venom.
We are. What did they say in the trailer? Symbiote. Yeah, I don't know what it
was.
was, but Peter was making fun of it, and I was like, "Yeah, that's pretty. Yeah, I can do that too."
A symbiote.
Well, there's also Tom Hardy's voice, which strangely enough now reminds me of Eric from Dragon Quest XI. Maybe that's what they were going for.
Maybe Tom Hardy voiced it. Really?
The Tom Hardy voice in the new Venom movie. Like it now reminds me of Eric, and I can't get that out of my head. Great.
Tom Hardy is like engaged in a decade-long endeavor to convince us he wasn't Bane from Batman.
No, but he totally was, and I love him for it.
You can come in and be like, "I'm Tom Hardy, and I'm Venom now, and we will not hurt people." And I'm like, "Yes, brother, you will not hurt anyone as Venom."
It would be very painful for you.
It's only fitting
regular bowel memories are a bitter memory.
That you guys would bring back the Bane voice for this reunion episode.
Yeah. We do what we can.
Yeah. Well, you know what, guys? It's like it's beyond lunchtime at this point. Somebody, I think Steven is eating. So
nobody wants to talk about Cyberpunk. Nobody wants to talk about Cyberpunk, huh? Can I? Okay, I do not want to open up the can of worms, but like Derek, can I just ask? Is it just because everybody's talking about it? Is that like? Is this been overanalyzed?
I just think I think that the conversation is just kind of tired right now, especially because we've seen it's not a vertical slice. They've said that is from like a build of the game that's fully intact and has everything running. I haven't even watched the whole video yet, so for my part, I just feel like I don't have as much to contribute. But yeah, a lot of the conversation surrounding Cyberpunk has been very tired and based on a lot of assumptions. And
yep,
the game,
I think that's fair.
Is hardly solidified at this point, so it's just like shut the F up and wait. I'm not saying like don't discuss. I'm just saying that like I'm tired of seeing the same points repeated about something that we haven't had hands-on time with necessarily. So
I think that's fair. The only thing that I really had was this realization when I was watching it of, I think I've only liked one shooting-based RPG, and that was Mass Effect 2 and 3, which I'm counting as one because they basically play the same way. And so when
Fallout.
But I like Fallout in terms of the VAT system. I hate the actual shooting in those games. It sucks. It feels terrible. And like watching the health bars deplete, I started getting that like, am I going to get really bored of this? The way I got bored of Borderlands, the way I didn't like the combat in Fallout 4. Like, there's just for some reason, just something in the back of my brain does not like watching a health bar deplete when I shoot somebody in a video game. It feels weird. It's why I didn't like Destiny. And so when I was watching that demo, I was like, okay, I'm seeing some cool things and I'm kind of digging this, but I know in the back of my brain, I have never really liked this except Mass Effect 2, which for all intents and purposes, Mass Effect 2 and 3 are just Uncharted games. Like they are. Like you hide behind cover and you shoot people in very similar combat to Uncharted, but there's a health bar.
Oh, and like powers and
yeah, but I played as a sniper, and so most everything died in 1 or 2 hits. So it felt like I was playing just a regular action game most of the time.
Okay.
Except I
You should play Uncharted 4.
I feel like that's a hot take for another episode.
Oh, sure. But when I watched the Cyberpunk demo, I was just having this like, I'm seeing cool things, but I think I wanted it to be a little bit more Deus Ex, and it looks a little bit more Mass Effect-y, Borderlands-y, shooty. And I'm not sure if I'm on board with that. I wanted more of an immersive sim, and it doesn't feel like they're going in that direction. That's fine, but
I wanted a little more cyberpunk.
Yeah, you had a weird take on that, which I want to discuss with you at some point because I
mean, go bring it up. Go ahead.
I mean, it's sort of the can of worms, but I think without getting too much into it, I like CDPR's games. I like The Witcher 3. I think better than Rob does. I like The Witcher 2 better than Rob does.
That's true as well.
I actually beat The Witcher 1, so like
I beat it. I didn't say I enjoyed it. I beat it.
I mean, that one legitimately hasn't aged well, but like narratively, it's cool. I feel like they are great at systems and like they are very into pleasing their fan base. I don't think their social media necessarily reflects that.
Yep. Yep.
But I think for me, as somebody who's very interested in cyberpunk as like a thematic thing, I feel like what I saw, and I didn't watch the whole video. I watched like 20 minutes of it or something. I don't know. I was sort of half paying attention. It feels like they are marketing their game to a very specific kind of person. It feels like there's an assumption that the player is male, which is fine. Even if you play as a girl, like the game is still like very much like, we're not going to show you the dude butt, but you're going to have a boob in your face for this whole thing. There's like there's an element of that feels very like assumed audience. Like those are all sort of side things too. I feel like it has the visual signifiers of cyberpunk, but what I saw of the writing in that did not feel like cyberpunk. It felt like every other RPG, but now we have space guns and space glasses and space cars. It didn't feel very like like Shadowrun, the old Shadowrun game, like fighting the Megacorp and pushing the boundaries of what identity can mean. And again, it's a short demo, I can't judge all the writing, but the tone of the writing in that, to me, felt like it had left something to be desired. And, again, it's a small chunk of the game. There's a lot left, and there could be more. And, I'm sure the defense squad is logging on right now to come bomb my Twitter. It doesn't feel like they took anything other than the visual cool stuff from Cyberpunk, and they didn't take any of the like people transcending what our notions of identity can be and like how technology can change how we view ourselves as humanity. And obviously there is the, people have complained that the only markers in like gender are male and female, which feels weird for Cyberpunk. Cause like we are already moving past the idea of like a binary and like it feels slow. But like even now in 2018, we are moving past the idea of there being this binary. So it feels weird to me that a game that is cyberpunk, which thematically deals in that kind of identity, does not even attempt to broach that subject. Like having for me, it's like it's a very simple change. There was that one other game, I don't remember what it was, some Warhammer game or some mech game, I don't know. that was just like, yeah, you choose your character's pronoun. And I'm like, that's a much cooler way to handle it, and then just give you the character builder, right? Like,
that was BattleTech that did that, yeah.
Yeah, like identify however you want, whatever kind of character you want to be playing. And then, in the character builder, just let you build the character you want to build. I get from a development standpoint why you would do that, because like obviously in a first-person game it's going to have a lot of dialogue. You need to refer to the player by something, and there are obviously technical factors in there. But it's little things here and there are making me think that I'm not going to be impressed with the writing in the game. But it's very early. Maybe that'll change. And obviously they want to please their fans, so maybe they will respond to that, or maybe they'll just snap at everyone on Twitter.
So I don't want to jump down your throat, because I actually agree with some of what you said. Like the scene where she woke up and she had obviously been sleeping with a dude, that definitely felt like male gaze. Like that skeeved me out. Like I'm sitting there going, there's a right way and a wrong way to handle this, and this kind of feels like the David Cage, like I'm going to show Madison's butt, but I'm not going to show like the dude's butt. Like I totally agree with you there. For me, I actually disagree with you when it comes to CD Projekt Red's previous work. I think their storylines and their characters are the good part. I think system-wise and gameplay-wise, their games have been borderline passable, and I don't want to retread ground on that. I know I have the dissenting opinion with how Witcher 2 and Witcher 3 play, but we talked about this briefly in messages, Steven. Like I went back and I actually checked. Most of the side quests in The Witcher 3 give you a little bit of gold. There are the side quests that give you blueprints and some runes, but based on when you do them, a lot of times you get them and they're useless to you at this point if you didn't do them at the appropriate level. So I was playing those games for the story, not so much the gameplay hooks.
I don't necessarily have a problem with the Witcher story. I think it's fine. I just think that we are several years out from the Witcher now and dealing with a different subject here.
I think that's fair. I think that's very fair. And what I would say is we've had the two Deus Ex games that both tried to go for higher ideals and kind of screwed it up along the way by saying everything's gray. And you and I very much agree. Like we would rather have a developer take a goddamn stand instead of saying, well, both sides are evil, like the BioShock Infinite problem.
Well, look at again, Blade Runner has its own issues, but look at Blade Runner. Blade Runner doesn't go, well, technically the people who are murdering the replicants also have a good position. That's not what makes that story interesting. That story, the conflict is what creates the interest in that story. It's not well, everybody's exactly equally culpable. This is Dragon Age Inquisition.
I think there's two ways. Well, there's not two ways. There's a million different ways they could go with Cyberpunk. What I saw out of that demo was a game based around a narrative based around stories and characters. And I agree with you, not the higher ideals of identity, of technology, its influence on society. Now, that's not saying that they don't get there. I think you could tell a very meaningful story if you did a character focused narrative in a cyberpunk future. Maybe that's not what you're looking for, and I can understand that.
The problem I have with that is that you are saying that a character-based story would not deal with a character's sense of identity, or that identity is not a binary where you are either about character and narrative, or you are about identity and themes. Themes are not it's like Luke Cage season 2. The characters state the themes of the show at you over and over again, and it's unpopular opinion, Luke Cage season 2 is terrible because it's dealing with complicated themes, but literally the characters are going, I am dealing with masculinity right now as an issue, almost in as many words. I think that's cool, but the point being is that a character-based story does not necessarily mean that it is not also something that's dealing with thematics. They're not two mutually exclusive things.
I see what you're saying now. So kind of like how Mass Effect has your individual character moments, but it is a story about races and interacting with each other, and that plays directly into those character interactions. So I think what you want to see is no. This is why we have these discussions, because now I'm seeing the argument that you're getting at. So you want there to be because we're talking about like technology augmenting the character, you want the character to acknowledge the fact that something's changing. And they have talked a little bit about how there's some kind of humanity stat in the game, which makes me think back to like, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. But I think I see what you're saying now, which is like you want to see those themes of cyberpunk, of technology and its influence on society and the individual. You want it to be more than just like a Grand Theft Auto game with, powers.
Right.
Is what I think you're saying.
In a way, yeah. Like basically what I mean is that give me a reason that this game is cyberpunk other than, we did the medieval thing, now we're doing the cool futuristic thing. Like,
but do you think Witcher had a lot of themes of medieval society in it or anything like that? And I'm not saying that to be an asshole. I'm saying like I'm discussing it with you.
I mean, Witcher has, plenty of like narrative flaws that you could point out, but like Witcher is dealing with themes. Like, I mean, the entire core premise of the Witcher universe in the books as well, and yes, before you send me hate mail, I've read all the books, is like there is like this element of racism and like racial tension.
Okay.
And, like, like look at the way people treat Witchers. Like Witchers are like viewed through this like very like lens of they are mutants, and like people see them and like they have like visceral reactions. Like even though I don't think CDPR necessarily is always intentionally looking at those things or at all looking at those things, like there are overarching thematics behind all of the quests in The Witcher. Like, maybe some of them are just like, we picked a fantasy trope that sounded cool, but like, there's like not the Red Baron, whatever the hell his name was. That whole quest is dealing with a lot of complicated things. Yeah, like that quest is dealing with complicated things. And like Geralt's identity is like the main thing in the first two games. Like Geralt doesn't remember who he is. And like, you have this character who doesn't remember his background or who he is, but he's being treated by people in a certain way. And that is, you can argue it all you want. You are making a statement with that about how people are treated, even if you don't want to see yourself as a mutant, as Geralt, because you are the hero. You're like, oh, I'm cool. People are like, oh, there's that white hair. That dude is doped up on all kinds of weird drugs and like is a mutant. Like, so it doesn't matter that Geralt doesn't remember. And again, this is a very hyper-specific example to describe something very broad. But like, any decent story has themes. It's not like necessarily someone sets out to say, these are the themes of my story, but like those themes come up through the writing and the concerns of the writers. And I actually think they're pretty different in each Witcher game. And I think a lot of those things do take advantage of the setting. I would argue good writing always takes advantage of its setting. Like there has to be a reason your story takes place sometime other than, dude, guns are cool. Like, I don't know, like future guns, like laser beam guns,
I guess what I would leave it as is like, let's see where they go. Like, and I can definitely, based on the conversation we just had, I can agree with you that like I didn't see that stuff in that demo, but I think that also doesn't necessarily mean it's not there.
I think Steven's points are very salient, and that's but I also agree with that, what you just said, Rob. Like, let's see where it goes, and I'm not. It's just like given their track record, it's
sure. Yeah.
It's kind of muddy, like my expectations aren't super high for that kind of nuance in the storytelling. So me like putting up resistance to the topic at the very beginning wasn't trying to stop you guys from having a discussion and bringing up these points. Like they're worth acknowledging. And I think Steven's right. I just personally, I'm like tired of hearing people raging about it because a lot of the discussion has been very one dimensional, but I know that that's not what I can expect from a discussion here. So
I
think the issue is that on the internet and especially on Twitter, the discussion becomes, I want this game to have options for transgender characters or characters who are non-binary, and it is the fanboy people, and many fans are not like this. It is the fanboy people going, F you, no, you're wrong. Everything they've ever made is gold, and you dare accuse them of anything. Like that is just meaningless and pointless, and just miss me with all that. Like, I don't
recently
care.
I had somebody comment on my review of Dragon Quest 11, which I gave a 9 out of 10, I believe.
Which such a low score.
You hated it.
Which I repeatedly praised as being like landmark and amazing and so many different ways, but took 2 paragraphs of my like 9-paragraph review to discuss how crappy Dragon Quest is about handling women in general and like their weird gender issues, which stem from like some very traditionally held Japanese cultural values. And I just think it's like, I pointed that out and I was like, hey, like these things were kind of weird, off-putting, and almost out of place given how good this game is in every other way. And somebody's like, you must have really been reaching hard to find that because this game sounds like a masterpiece. And I'm like, hi, have you played 70 hours of it? No, you sure haven't. Like, it's one of those like occasions where I don't want to be smug and be like, well, as a privileged reviewer, but it's like, dude, I've played the game. You have not. And also, like, different people have different objective standards for, like, all reviews are subjective, rather. Sorry, not objective. All reviews are subjective, and, like, it's an issue that bothered me enough that I wanted to bring it up because the game could have done better in that respect. And if it had, then the overall experience would have been even better. It would have gone from excellent to excellenter. So, like, I just feel like it's stupid to not, like, why not address things that we think could be better? It's just, like, that's how progress is made.
And Derek, I think that's something on this show that we always strived for, which was looking at games and wanting them to be better. And like, I brought up one scene in the Cyberpunk thing that made me a little uncomfortable. And I'm like, if by contrast, the dude is showing his ass cheeks everywhere, and we get a little shot of him that sexualizes that player character. Cool, awesome, but that's not what you showed. And I think that's what Steven's pointing out is like, you showed the low-hanging fruit of the promiscuous female character. And like, okay, guys, I'm not saying I'm ready to damn you right now, but you're making me roll my eyes a little bit. Like we're chasing, like we're chasing around Madison in a dream in her underwear right now. Like that's actually what you guys are doing right now.
I mean, and to be clear, my main argument for all of these things, Dragon Quest included, is that stop assuming that your player is male. Like,
sure, absolutely.
Like, cisgender male. Like, that is the assumption. Like, for example, I've been reading this history book on PlayStation, actually, the PlayStation Anthology, which by and large is pretty solid. And like, there's a lot of talk about the advertising for early PlayStation. And like, there was some exec from PlayStation was like, our thing with PlayStation is we wanted to acknowledge that there's more to life than games. We wanted, there's film, cinema, girls. And it's like right there is that assumption right there that exec had. And women, I mean, again, I feel weird saying this with Caitlin here. Like, I shouldn't be explaining this, so I'm not going to. But like, there's that assumption of like, all players are dudes. Yeah, mostly men play games. That is false. Like, it's just false. I'm not going to belabor the point again because it's weird for me to be saying that. But like, stop assuming that the default player is a heterosexual cisgender man. Like, just don't. Like, and there's no need. You don't have to.
Right, and that doesn't mean that that's not appropriate in like some context for some games or many games. It is predominantly the thing. Very, very, very predominantly that is the assumed audience, and that doesn't mean that that's not okay. It's just that gaming is a more universal experience than a lot of like writers and developers want to acknowledge, I think. And that's stifling the creativity of the medium, I think, because it's not allowing us to explore all of these different like ideas and stories. And it's also weakening the impact of stories for everybody who identifies outside of that, like ostensibly non-majority subset. Like, there's just so many people who play games, and it just seems silly to keep like pushing them, I don't know.
No, and I appreciated the conversation because like I had not thought about the identification of cyberpunk identity and what we're having right now with the expansion of the idea of gender in society. And so like I had not seen that parallel. And by having that discussion with Steven, it's like, oh yeah, you could actually do some really cool shit with that. Like,
and now to be clear, I would encourage you very strongly to go talk to people who aren't me, who are much better able to explain it.
Sure. No. And that's
like,
exactly.
I am not the arbiter of that. And
you're not the expert?
Most of my arguments on that are distillations from people who have stated it better and are in a better position to be stating that. I am
absolutely
like,
yeah. I think
go seek out better people to talk to than me.
I think what you're saying, Steven, is you want Cyberpunk to be more than just a character. You want it to be more than just guns in an RPG. You
more
want it
than
to actually
skin.
Say something with the theme, with the tone, with the setting. Say something with it the way that like a Mass Effect talks about, racism using, space. Like, you can do stuff like that.
It's the reason why we didn't just get a sci-fi Dark Souls, because Dark Souls is built around a set of assumptions, and Bloodborne
I think that was called The Surge.
Yeah, and you hated that game.
I know. I'm just saying.
But the point being is that like we all say, "Oh, it'd be so cool to get sci-fi Dark Souls," but like you need to really sit and think through what that means. Like, why do you have that setting? Like, did you just pick it because it looked cool? Because like, I feel like you need to have a good reason. Like what's your gameplay reason for picking this? What's your narrative reason for picking this? You know, like, obviously not every game is dealing with complex narrative themes, but like, I don't care about the visual element of a game. Like, you know, give me a reason why you picked this visual element.
Well, I still want my Souls game mixed with Armored Core, and it's like Blaster Master, and you are investigating a hostile world and going in and like driving around in a giant mech, and then you get out of the mech and you go into like an office building, and it's Dark Souls. How about that?
Sure.
Come on. Okay, barring that, how about ninjas and grappling hooks? Does that sound good?
I mean, how about ninjas and sandwiches for lunch?
Ooh, sandwiches. Okay, sorry, Derek. I just wanted to have that conversation with Steven because it was one of those like I don't think I'm understanding where you're coming from, and this doesn't work through text.
Look at that. We bridged the gap here on Random Encounter today.
There's no problem having these conversations. I try to tell my students that it's okay to ask questions and not be a dick about it and learn something.
Yeah,
like that's okay.
I think the important thing is to just be intellectually honest about it. Don't go and ask somebody, "Why do you have a problem with this?" when your question is actually, "Why are you so terrible?" and I disagree with you.
Right. Don't be a sea lion, basically.
Don't be a sea lion?
I'm going to need explanation for that.
I don't get it.
It's a new troll tactic.
Is it like a milkshake duck analog?
In this day and age of Gamergate, it's a new troll tactic that I have recently been exposed to, and it is not awesome.
Yeah, but I don't understand it. What does sea lion mean in this context?
I actually literally don't understand. I haven't, I guess, looked it up. I don't know how the term came to be to refer to an individual like this. They basically insert themselves into a conversation and get defensive about a point that you're making, and then when you try to debate with them, they ask for receipts.
Yeah.
With in like an intellectually dishonest way.
Yeah.
Of like, you know, I'm only asking you questions. And I mean, if you can even read it, it comes out of like a right-wing tactics book of like, you know, just keep asking questions and don't ever accept the answers. And always deflect. According to Wikipedia, it came from some webcomic, but
lovely.
Interesting.
Oh, it came from a comic.
Yeah.
I think I know the comic you're talking about, which is awesome and explains what it is, but I didn't realize that was okay.
Is it like a Katie Teacher thing or something?
It looks like a web comic called Wondermark.
Yeah.
Huh. Never heard of it.
I can send it to you.
We'll endeavor not to be sea lions in this show to the best of our collective ability, unless in the cyberpunk future we can mod ourselves to be sea lions.
Nice.
Debate entirely.
Starring Kevin Smith's Tusk.
Sure. Starring oh my god, Waterworld. Who is in that?
Kevin Costner.
Kevin Costner. Okay.
That Kevin.
Kevin.
The other Kevin.
The other Kevin. Kevin
Feige.
Kevin. Okay. Well, truly, I am going to wrap this episode up so I can go eat some lunch and y'all can finish your breakfast, etc.
I'm hungry.
I know, I'm very hungry. Rob and Steven, thank you both so much for making time to return to the show for a little mini reunion.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Very nice to have you. I think I'd like to have you both on again at some point. Maybe we can do like a milestone episode 175 or something like that.
That should take about 2 years. I think I'm free then.
Hey, we're doing bi-weekly now that you're gone, dude.
Isn't it hard? It is hard to keep that schedule, though, isn't it?
It is.
As you get more and more busy.
Another podcast on the side, and we also, there's like work and stuff. So,
what other podcast, Derek?
What work?
Yeah, what's that other podcast?
The Astral Era.
I actually
the Final
know.
Fantasy 14 podcast. Yeah, let me plug it clearly and loudly. Astral Era of Final Fantasy 14. Final Fantasy 14. It's your port of call for news. It's a Final Fantasy 14 podcast. You can check it out at astralerapodcast.com, and it is hosted by me, my boyfriend Jeremy, and our friend Wolf, and the three of us are a lot more crass on that show than we are in Random Encounter, and we talk Final Fantasy updates and what we're doing in the game, etc., etc. And I also wanted to extend a thank you to Caitlin for being here today. I know that a lot of the discussion was focused on the returning crew members, but your opinion and presence is always valued and welcome. So thank you.
Hopefully my one-liners were funny. I don't know.
Funnier than mine.
No, they were great. They were good.
Most things are funnier than Steven's one-liners.
It's true.
Aren't you glad?
Steven.
They're here, everybody. So thank you for listening today. If you have questions, comments, or spare potions, you can email us at podcast@rpgfan.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at rpgfancom and like our Facebook page at facebook.com/rpgfancom. Please subscribe to us on iTunes or through the RSS feed. I'm still waiting for your reviews, and it would make me very happy if you would leave some. So for Rob, for Steven, for Caitlin, and myself, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you all later.
Da, 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 da.
Bye.